This week, Gene Erik, Senior Product Officer at Xcape, to talk about, we welcome him to talk about OpenWRT for Enterprise and Labs. Then, Rob Gurzeev, CEO and co-founder of CyCognito, joins us for a technical segment all about protecting the attack surface. In the security news, Microsoft patches 6 0 days under active attack. The U.S. seizes $2.3 million that was paid by Colonial Pipeline for the ransomware attack. The largest password compilation of all time leaked online with 8.4 billion entries. I didn't know you could spell password that many different ways. How to pwn a satellite. One Fastly customer triggered internet meltdown. And I got 99 problems, but my knack ain't one. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly.
When it comes to web app and API security, the choice is simple. You can choose Fastly's security solution that teams will actually use in full blocking mode, just like 90% of their customers. Or you can stick with costly options that you probably just turn off. You can get Fastly's all-in-one platform that protects apps everywhere they live, however they're built. Or departments can agree to disagree. You can go to securityweekly.com/Fastly to learn more. Or you can just wish you had.
And welcome to the show. But first, let me introduce you to a man whose eyes are up here, Mr. Paul Asadorian.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode number 698, recorded on June 10th, 2021, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. To my left, Mr. Larry Pesce.
Howdy. I think I'm going to do the same thing. Ooh.
Got to crack the beers.
Got it. Narragansett.
Yeah, exactly, right. When we drink Narragansett, which is brewed right here in Rhode Island, we got to say beers. Beers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Lobsters and beers.
Lobsters and beers.
There's a lobster on my beer.
And if we were a little further north, you couldn't park your car in Harvard Yard.
That's right.
Because you'd get fucking arrested. That's how this show is going to go, my friend.
Oh, boy. On the lines remotely, Mr. Tyler Robinson is here with us. Tyler, welcome.
I like when you guys talk dirty Eastern to me.
That is dirty Eastern. Dirty Eastern talk. Mr. Jeff Mann is here with us. Jeff, welcome.
Happy to be here, Paul. Wish I was there.
Wish you were too.
Soon.
I had a crypto-related story in there in the news. I can't wait to talk about it with you.
Oh,
it
boy.
so happened it overlapped with where I'm at on in my book. So it's going to be fun.
I can hardly wait.
Right? Mr. Lee Neely is here with us. Lee, welcome.
Good to be here from a little ways away. You know, I asked the neighbor's dog what was 2 minus 2. She said nothing.
Wow. And in addition to the Paul's Security Weekly crew, Adrian's just on a mission to be on every single... Have you appeared on every single show on the network yet? Mr. Adrian Sanabria is here with us.
Hey. No, not Security Weekly News yet. I think that's the only one I haven't been on. I've been on application, security and compliance, business security.
Got to get by Doug to get on SWN. It's hard. It's tough. It's very close. He guards that show with his life. So, and then he can go around the world, and you get a badge or something.
And I actually learned to talk a little bit north of you. So. In Norwood, just outside of Boston, in New Hampshire. So the accent has been known to return if I'm around those folks too often.
Or drinking a lot is usually.
Or drinking, or both.
It's weird. It's weird how you reverse your native tongue.
Beers and lobsters.
Alrighty, if you want to stay in the loop, all things Security Weekly, visit securityweekly.com/subscribe. You can subscribe via your favorite podcast catcher, subscribe to our YouTube channel, sign up for our mailing list, join our Discord server, and follow us on our newest live streaming platform, Twitch. Also, join us on June 24th at 11 a.m. Eastern to learn how web application firewalls can help mitigate exposure in a complex threat landscape. That one's sponsored by Neustar. Visit securityweekly.com/webcast to register now. If you missed any of the previously recorded webcasts or technical trainings, they're available on our website for your viewing pleasure at securityweekly.com/on-demand. Gene Erik is the Senior Product Officer at Xcape Inc. Gene is a longtime hacker community member and enjoys contributing to the community. Today, he joins us to discuss OpenWRT for enterprise and labs. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Gene, welcome to the show.
Oh, you beat me to the line. Dag nabbit, that was going to be mine.
Oh, sorry. I take it back. Okay, you say it now.
Hi, long-time listener, first-time caller. Great to be here on the show.
Sir, can you turn your radio down?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, Gene, it is nice to have you on the show. We thank you for your contributions to supporting Security Weekly, always being present. Most of the time being present in our Discord server. So, thank you for that.
Yeah, no worries. I've been listening to you guys for a very, very long time since Twitchy days.
I was gonna say, do you remember Twitchy? We were just talking.
Yes, I absolutely do.
How can you forget Twitchy?
Ooh, popcorn.
Yeah, and all of those great teasers and cut sounds and whatnot.
Yeah, I remember John Strand telling me, like, I think he was in studio live when Twitchy was there once, and Strand turns to me, he's like, dude, Twitchy is insane, but he's really smart. I'm like, yeah, that's accurate assessment.
Accurate. Yep.
Yeah. I have fond memories of a long time ago. Ben Jackson was on the show, and you all still had an IRC channel, and I was enjoying throwing jokes at him and watching everybody just kind of cackle while they're trying to do the podcast, because you couldn't talk about that stuff back then.
Also, Ben Jackson, Black Ratchet, also not black. Like, come on! Like, what is Black Dragon was someone from the history of the show as well, and he wasn't black either. I was disappointed. I'm like, you had that mental picture of someone in your mind, and then they look completely different.
Yep. Yeah, that happens.
Well, at least Dr. Doug is white, so
that's true. That's true. Dr. Doug White is white, so.
More pink, but whatever.
Yeah. If we all had names that described us, I'm not sure it would be the best thing.
Yeah, let's not go there because we want to get to OpenWRT. One of our favorite. I haven't messed with OpenWRT in some time. So, Gene, I want to turn it over to you. Oh, actually, Gene, before we get started, I do want to ask you, since it's your first time on the show, how did you get your start in information security?
So I got my start in information security pretty early. I was dinking around with computers probably since I was 4 or so. My school had a like one color Apple II, which was really like amazing at the time because that wasn't a thing that existed anywhere. My dad had a Commodore 64, so I was playing with that all the time. But the weirdness really started when I got a Game Genie for my NES and found out that you could just start changing memory locations, and that's what this thing did. So I thought that was pretty cool, and I went off to the races from there. And I didn't really think anything of it until I got booted off the internet for the first time with an out of bounds memory error by somebody while I was on IRC. And I thought, I really need to learn how to do that. That's really cool. So
yeah, it's interesting how getting hacked is kind of a lot of people's story of like, hey, I got to know how that works. I want to get into this.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely I don't know if it's as mysterious these days as it was back then, but it was like, how do you even do that to somebody? How do you make their computer stop working across the internet? Like, that's insane. And then from there, like, I fell into like all of the IT buckets that you could possibly think of. I've worked in tech support. I've worked in IT. I've worked in operations and security. And I did a lot of work in software QA before I finally convinced people that I actually knew how to do the security part of it, which is really weird, but they didn't.
No, that's actually not weird. I think that's a great kind of segue into security.
Well, the thing is, like, they just flat out didn't believe me until I started showing them, like, okay, look, I'm doing these piddly little software bugs, but if you want me to write an exploit for your software, I can do that too. I just didn't think you were ready.
Nice.
So I gave a boss an exploit, and they're like, "What?"
I mean,
I shelled your database. So
yeah, I mean, exploits are really just part of QA. So
that is my opinion. Like, if you have a really good software QA engineer, that's just a part of what they do. So
agreed.
I mean, that's kind of how I fell into the bucket, and then I kind of continued to do more crazy crap since then. So there you go.
I haven't messed with OpenWRT in quite some time. And I know at the time, in 2007, that's a really long time ago now, when Larry and I were writing the book, actually before we started writing the book, we were like, okay, what firmware project is really good? And we did some research, and we concluded that OpenWRT is great. And I used to get really mad when people used to say Tomato, because at the time, Tomato was just a fork of like Linksys's open source software, which Larry and I had already reverse engineered, and we're like, that's total crap, man. Like, it's terrible. And we came on OpenWRT. And it's good to see that it's still alive and growing today.
Yeah. I may have done something similar with a comparable company's router when I was working in support there, and stolen their web interface to make an emulator. They both loved and hated that.
Interesting. Making emulators is not easy either.
Yeah,
especially
I mean, it is when you can just steal the PHP source.
Yeah, I guess suppose we have the source. Yeah.
But I mean, and that's really easy because you just do edit, view. Remember that? Sorry.
Someday we're going to have to find a clip of that.
Yep. Oh.
With regards to the OpenWRT stuff, though, like, you guys were part of the inspiration that got me started on that. Like, I didn't know about it until I heard about it on your show and started digging into it, and got the book, got myself a Linksys device, and saw another talk later that year from somebody at TourCon. And it's kind of been a fun ride since then.
Very nice.
So tell us more about OpenWRT today, Gene.
All right. So one of the things that I find curious is that people don't really talk about OpenWRT that much anymore, which is crazy to me because it is now pretty rock solid. Like, it's a good platform. It can be easy to use if you just use their pre-built packages and stuff, and there are commercial devices that use it. And people just don't talk about really playing with it anymore. But it's based on Linux, so it's got huge amount of horsepower, and you can kind of do whatever you want to do with it. The thing that I still take away from it is it gives you the opportunity to get enterprise features out of something that, while it is capable physically of providing those features, was kind of never meant to. So, your home gateway isn't a Cisco product. I mean, it is a Cisco product, but it's not a Cisco enterprise product, right? So you're not expecting it to have BGP and failovers and all of that stuff, multiple WAN links, VLAN trunking, that kind of stuff. But, if you throw OpenWRT on your Linksys, now you have access to all those features. You can do them all. And once you have a couple other little pieces that aren't super expensive these days, you can start doing some really cool things with your home network. I actually use that on my home network. I've been using the same device running OpenWRT for 3-4 years now, and I haven't had one single issue with it. It's just rock solid.
What hardware are you running at home?
I'm running a WRT 1900 ACS. I actually went to look it up today, and I was checking on back then what I had paid for it on Amazon, and to my surprise, the price on the thing has not changed.
Oh, geez. And it's 3 years old.
Yeah, and it's still just as valuable of a platform as it has ever been. So, like, that should say something.
Yep. I'm just amazed at the amount of hardware support that OpenWRT has now. I've been working on the SANS IoT hacking class, and we're getting close to our deadline. But as part of some of the labs and stuff we were looking at, we wanted a device that we could customize, and a hardware device and a router. And I went through all of the supported devices that were like readily available, were inexpensive, and would run OpenWRT. And there were like 3,000 devices that were listed in that thing, and there's probably more. And I had to strip that down, and I found one, and it was relatively cheap, and it was something that I didn't expect would have run OpenWRT, which was a number of the MikroTik routers.
Wait, MikroTik runs?
Some of them can run
Yep.
OpenWRT, yeah.
Microtic routers can run
Does it
on.
run on x86 hardware as well as the ARM?
It does.
Yeah, you can do x86 OpenWRT.
You can use it as your desktop, Tyler.
You could.
I mean, you could. I don't know if you want to. But
If you really wanted to, yeah, you probably could.
I wonder if like you can run an x86, but like if it had copious amounts of CPU and RAM, if it actually had the reverse effect, right? Because it's usually tuned and compiled for smaller devices, right?
Well, you may be concerned about that, but I have some experience to the contrary. Here at Xcape, we actually make some devices that are x86 based OpenWRT devices. And here's one of them right here.
Oh, nice.
So they work really great and do some really cool stuff. And if you guys are interested, I'd tell you all about it.
What kind of advanced features? Like you said, enterprise kind of grade stuff. I'm trying to compare this with something, say, like the Ubiquiti platform or the MikroTik. Those are two of the primary edge use cases I see for like small to medium business or hacker tinkers.
Netgate.
Yeah.
PFSense, Netgate, right?
Yeah,
Sonic
Sense is
Wall.
another great one.
If you want to talk about stuff that people don't use as much, Sonic Wall's still in the running. So yeah, the enterprise feature stuff. So you could do all kinds of things. If you want to use it as a real router instead of like a NAT device, you can do that. It does BGP. So you can set up your ASNs and actually route to other devices. You can set it up to do failovers, multipath WAN for wireless stuff because of the power of a couple of different options for actually supplying wireless, like host APD. You get enterprise level features from 802.1x, like if you want to use EAP-TLS as your identifier instead of a password, you can do that. So you can do completely passwordless Wi-Fi with OpenWRT, and that's doing certificate-based Wi-Fi with a home gateway. I'd like to see that through the normal firmware. I don't think you can. So there's those VLAN trunking. I use LACP in my network, so I have two network connections that are used in tandem for aggregation and for failover. There's all kinds of wild stuff that you can do with it. If you,
does that trunking use like a non-proprietary protocol, something that works with? Yeah. Okay, like the Netgears, because I know I've had some issues with.
So I have mine trunked down to a Cisco switch.
Okay.
So they are negotiated, and like I said, it's VLAN trunked to the Cisco switch, and it's using LACP link aggregation to use multiple network adapters to that switch, so I don't lose connectivity, even if I unplug one of them. It's seamless.
But doesn't it need an ARP protocol so that the two different IP addresses can ARP for the same IP address? Now I can't remember which, because there's the Cisco proprietary one. There's more of an open one that's on PFSense that I'm using now. I forget what they're called now, though.
Yeah. So the LACP is the open source one.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What is it? HSRP? Right. Yeah. Is the Cisco one. And then there's the open one, and I can't remember. There's a similar acronym.
Yeah,
it's been so long since I've done it on Cisco equipment, I actually don't remember.
Hot standby router protocol, right? It's HSRP.
Hot.
That's a little different from link aggregation, though.
Right. So you're link aggregating so that you get 2 gig instead of 1 gig in throughput?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So I've got two Ethernet ports that look like one to the rest of the network. But if I pull one link, all that happens is I get, maybe I lose a packet or two.
Yeah.
And the speed drops from 2 gigabits to 1 gigabit.
Gotcha.
So I'm big on redundancy.
Have you done where you have two OpenWRT routers?
Yes.
And they're ARPing for this. That's how I had the PFSense configured here.
So you can give a virtual IP address to two different devices, so that they've each got their own IP, and you give them a virtual IP, and that HSRP that you're talking about, high availability stuff, is in case one of those routers falls over.
Right.
The other one can usurp that virtual IP address.
Then you need to do it on the WAN side too. You did mention there was a WAN.
Yeah.
protocol.
So there are a couple different ways to do it with WAN. There's MWAN 3 that you can use to do link protection, so your WAN doesn't go out. There are other protocols that you can use that take a little more work, and we actually use one of those other ideas for WAN link on the device that I just showed you guys. That's our VeraHall device, and it actually has 2 cellular modems in it. And we shotgun those 2 cellular modems together, and if you were to lose one link or the other, it doesn't matter. And in the meantime, you get to use the speed of both mobile devices.
How does it do the aggregation of both of them? Is that configurable? Like, I know you can give a weight to one or the other, and in PFSense I can do it by firewall policy.
So we actually use a multipath protocol that essentially kind of works like a VPN tunnel to an AWS endpoint. And that's how we can make it so that your IP address doesn't look like it's changing if one of those links goes down. So you can have a video call over this device and lose one of those cellular connections, and you'd never know.
Oh, that's interesting.
Nice. It's almost like some software-defined perimeter type stuff.
Yeah. It's a pretty cool solution. It's an open source solution, but we tested the ever-loving heck out of it and made it work on this specific device, so that you guys can have, if you were to buy one, you get it as an appliance, and we manage all the hard stuff for you. So
the other way to do that is with routing protocols, but I felt like that was messy.
It is really messy, and you end up with a lot more
that.
loss, especially when you're talking about real-time protocols like video conferencing or phone calls and whatnot. It gets really messy.
Yeah, because I was looking at OSPF, BGP, and those type protocols to do the do it in layer 3. But I was like, I don't know that I want to maintain the whole routing protocol, because that's hard to troubleshoot too if something goes wrong. I thought I was just being a wuss, but you're making me feel better, Gene. Thanks.
I mean, you're still a wuss, but
I still am a wuss, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is like, I don't know if you did this back in the old school days when we had dial-up modems and stuff, but we used to shotgun dial-up modems together.
Yeah, US Robotics had one with 3-in-1 in one unit, and you could hook it up to 3 phone lines, and it would automatically do that failover for you, or bind them all together, and you could use the combination of all that bandwidth.
Wasn't that called muxing? Something mux? Like binded them all together, right?
Something's tickling at the back of the brain.
Yeah. It's a long
That's
time
half
ago.
of it. I forget the other.
Yeah,
half.
it's definitely a long time ago.
I'll have to go to 56k.net. Hold on.
Right.
Unfortunately, it turns out even if you can do that, if you have a crappy phone connection, say it's running over, say, I don't know, a microwave, it still won't work. I don't know why
Gene,
that
I think
is.
it'd be kind of interesting to have you chat through some of the stuff we were talking on Discord with some of the work from home aspects that we have going on, and just our general hacker ability to tinker. What's some of the configuration things you think a typical home network could get set up with that's not horrible to maintain, but still has a nice balance of security using something like OpenWRT?
Well, one of the things you could take advantage of, a lot of people use Wi-Fi devices for everything. I myself happen to enjoy wired things, but I get that I'm the weirdo these days. So, you're working from home, you've got your work laptop. You can take advantage of some of the not too hard to set up things that like host APD could give you on OpenWRT device to just say, if you see this MAC address, use 802.1x to put it on its own VLAN. And then you don't have to worry about whatever else is going on your wider network to isolate it. It's just automatically going to go on that separate VLAN.
That's kind of cool, actually.
Yes. I've used that in the past to do enforcement of things like leak-free VPN access. So when you don't want to force the client to get their laptop correct, you can kind of force the network to do it for you. So they don't have an opportunity to leak any data.
Paul, I think you were thinking of virtual circuit multiplexing or
VSR.
VCMux.
What is it? Oh,
yeah, I think you're right. I think that was what it is.
Which is, it sounds like it was used for DSL, for ATM and DSL stuff.
Interesting.
Thanks, Adrian.
So do you think from that standpoint, things like VLANs is something we should expect or start to push into the consumer networks, or always quarantined segmented guests? Like, what kind of things can we start to think about just as from a security side? And this is more of a brainstorm, not expecting you to have all the answers, but there's one of the questions we're continuously asked is, how are our home networks kind of configured? What can we do to configure a home network without having to be ultra guru and still have some segmentation, some level of security? We've got a lot of laptops, kids, iPads, all kinds of ridiculous games, and wife's computers that ends up with Pinterest recipes that are god awful, full of malware. How do you kind of keep these things segmented and secure and build something that you can still maintain on a day to day?
Sure. So I do think that VLAN is a thing that we should kind of take advantage of, and it can be done even for if one of the big companies wanted to put it in production level. It can be done fairly easily with point and click in a web UI to just say, hey, if you see this thing, put it over there. But I still want it to be able to get the internet. Another good example would be, so with most OpenWRT installs by default, UPnP doesn't exist. It's not a service that's installed.
Hooray!
However, if you do any kind of gaming, then that's going to mess with your gaming.
Yep,
so
Nintendo
I
Switch.
actually have UPnP installed. However, I only have one device that's authorized to use it.
That's convenient.
Yes. So my Xbox is the only thing that can do UPnP. So it looks like it's a raw device out there on the internet. As far as it's concerned, I get all green lights, no latency, nothing.
That's awesome.
Anything else that tries to use it doesn't work.
Doesn't a lot of IoT devices rely on UPnP to at least get the setup right?
Some do. A lot of the ones that don't go out to the internet still take advantage of like broadcast domain stuff. So they expect to be able to broadcast to everybody and say, hey, where's my TV for a remote or what have you. And yeah, if you have things set up in a more secure way, you might have some trouble with that, but they're not insurmountable problems.
Usually it just means eroding the security of your network so IoT devices actually function.
You can, but one of the things with OpenWRT is you have the ability to selectively do that, just like you would an enterprise network. You've got something that needs to be in the DMZ, you put that one thing in the DMZ. You've got one thing that needs to talk to the database, you put that one thing in a VLAN that can talk to the database. So you just have to take the same concept and apply it to your home devices. So you got an IoT device that needs to go out to some sketchy domain and you don't want anything else to go to that sketchy domain. Well, you say that one device is able to do that.
So you're mapping SSIDs to VLANs.
Actually, I'm not mapping SSIDs to VLANs. The entirety of, I shouldn't say that. I have multiple SSIDs, so I have virtual access points with my OpenWRT setup, but I have certain rules within host APD where even if it's on the same SSID, if it sees that MAC address, it'll shovel it into a different VLAN.
Oh, interesting.
So
It's actually cleaner than the Ubiquity way of mapping VLANs out all over the place.
yeah, it can be, and you can take advantage of PVLANs if you do that. And like if you've only got one device that needs to be in that VLAN, then you can PVLAN it, and it's just over there somewhere. It's still got network access, but it can't see you and you can't see it. And that's all it needs, right?
Yeah, usually
what's
in
VLAN?
a private VLAN, because usually it's the initial setup that I find when you're setting up a new IoT device. It needs to hit the broadcast domain, it needs to go find stuff, needs to find my phone and things like that. I suppose you could put your phone and this device on the same VLAN during setup and then take your phone off of it. You got to play games. I mean, that doesn't necessarily translate to being easier for the user, but I think for us, that's certainly an option, because a lot of IoT devices, like once the initial setup is done, it really just needs to talk out to the internet and doesn't need to talk to anything else. And that most of the time, some of the time, depends on what it is, right?
Yeah, because you're not talking directly to it. You're talking to whatever it's talking to.
Yeah, when I fire up the app,
you're both
for,
going out to the internet. So.
right, my sprinkler system, right? I'm talking up to the cloud, not the device on my network.
Exactly.
One of the things I wanted to actually play with, but don't have the hardware to play with it, is to see the whole Amazon Sidewalk thing. If I could keep someone else's device from being on my network, even if it wanted to be. That was an interesting thing I wanted to try, but I don't have the gear.
I turn that off.
Or more importantly, put them on your network, but on a network VLAN that does some traffic manipulation, like a
Upside down internet.
Upside down internet. I was going to go right there.
Yeah, I love my neighbors from Josh Wright.
Yep. Yeah,
Yep.
Josh
Yes,
said that.
I was
Now the ring is always upside down.
Yep.
Those are fun. So I had a question on things conversations I have lately is, I get a neighbor they started with a single access point and they realize the house is big and they get a repeater and it sucks. And I'm thinking, would their life be better with OpenWRT? Would that be easier for them and give them a smoother experience without jumping into an enterprise type device or even mesh or something?
I mean, it depends. So with OpenWRT, your options are a lot more, open. So you can do things like jump around to different frequencies. You can actually put the thing in a monitor mode for some of the devices where it can give you a site survey all by itself and tell you what's going on. So when it comes to making a wider network, there are some software projects to make OpenWRT cooler with the whole concept of mesh, but they're not really what you'd call ready to go. So for me in my home network, I have in addition to the wireless that's built into my OpenWRT device, I have 3 Cisco AeroNet access points that hook up to my Cisco stuff, and I actually got all that stuff really cheap. I got 3 access points and a switch for $200. So
nice.
And does AC, and then the actual controller, because they're lightweight access points, the controller is just a VM.
That's how Joff does his network. I really think that many of us, Lee, as you mentioned, have fielded questions from our friends and family that are like, I'm having trouble with Wi-Fi. It's slow, and I'm told I need a repeater. Like, who's telling them to get these repeaters and stuff? Because I think we might all agree that a properly designed wireless network won't need a repeater. Like, if you've got good quality access points and you're able to place them, I mean, you have to go crazy running cables, but I think if you place them where you can easily run a cable, they're probably going to be fine.
I don't know. I can't think of anybody's excuse. I've got a 16,000 square foot church, and at one point I was running one Ubiquity long range access point, and that covered that and went 2 blocks to my parents' house.
Yeah, I can go up
nice antenna.
Right, I can go up in my attic, and I'm just lucky it's a straight shot into the basement where the internet comes in. So I run one cable up in the attic, and I dropped an access point down at the top of the stairwell, And like that one AP probably could cover most of my house.
And those repeaters just seem to cause more problems than they fix.
Yep.
You know, like they're designed for the average person to go to Best Buy and buy, but every time somebody does, you know, we tend to get those calls. Like I did what the instructions said with the repeater, and it's not working.
Well, because I think the backhaul and serving clients is done on the same radio. Is that right, Gene? Is that most of the design in a lot of these commodity devices?
Yeah, they're trying to do a mesh, but they don't do it very well. So they have two links that are basically on the same radio,
right?
Which means they're stepping on each other. So you don't get a lot of the benefit unless you have one that lets you run a wire, and then maybe you can get some good benefits out of that. But nobody, like home users, don't really want to do that.
No. Can you build an OpenWRT that does mesh that has two Wi-Fi adapters in it, even if like one's on board and one's USB?
You absolutely can. And I have in the past done that. The interesting thing with that is getting the mesh set up. Sometimes you have to be very selective about which wireless devices you use, because not all of them support the mesh features.
Right. When we say mesh, that's a separate 802.11 protocol. Correct.
Yes, that is. But yeah, as long as you get the hardware right, you can still get some help through OpenWRT, which is one of the cool things. Like they have the whole package management system for installing stuff, and a lot of times even enterprise features end up having a GUI section where you can, you don't have to get on the shell to configure everything.
Convenient. So convenient.
What? So you mentioned virtual access points. How does that? I assume that doesn't like step on other access points. How does that work?
So virtual access points is kind of like, let me give you a good example. I have in my home network, and I was going to comment on this on the solves where maybe OpenWRT could help with your friend's home network problem. I have a really old house. I have 100-year-old house, so there's like cement and wood and stuff in all the walls, which makes Wi-Fi all kinds of hooey. So one of the things I'm able to do with that is I have one network that only works on 2.4 gigahertz and one that only works on 5 gigahertz. So I can kind of manipulate stuff a little bit. And then I have multiple SSIDs, and those SSIDs have different authentication associated with them. So virtual access point is more like an overloaded term, I feel, that enterprises use to try to describe this, because it's not. It's most of the time it's just another SSID.
Yeah, it sounds more like a virtual SSID, right? It's just that front end.
Yeah. In my mind, a real virtual access point would be able to take advantage of the entirety of the 802.11 spectrum at the same time, so you could be on multiple channels. But, that's not really a thing single radios are good at. So,
but still, can you tie that to some of those VLANs that we're talking about also? Like if you wanted to use SSIDs to control like where people are going without actually having to set up multiple radios and multiple channels?
Absolutely. I actually do that in my network at home. So I have multiple security cameras, and the last one that I bought, I decided to make a little bit of a research project. So I bought a crappy Chinese camera. And I'm like, I don't really want this on my wider network, but it really wants Wi-Fi really bad. Let me see if I can kind of put it in its own little corner over here. So it has its own SSID and its own authentication, so it can't actually go to the rest of my network.
What did you call it?
I love that use
case. What did you call the SSID? What would you call
Danger zone?
Danger zone.
Danger zone.
Safely running shady stuff on your
So
network.
you did put it right into the danger zone.
I absolutely did, but it's on its own VLAN, and it's like firewalled and monitored all the heck. So if it was trying to do something weird, which it's tried to do some weird things, it basically doesn't get to do it. Can't call home. It can't connect to the global website thing that you're supposed to use to configure their cameras or to view their streams. I view it with on-VIF stuff.
Nice. What else can you do with OpenWRT these days?
So I've had multiple different VPNs set up on my network. I started out with Strong Swan, doing IKE v2 IPsec. And I've recently, when I had to redo the PKI infrastructure for that, I actually replaced it with OpenVPN because I wanted to play with that a little bit. And I got to tell you, it works great. I've got the profile on my cell phone, so I can pull up that VPN to my home router from anywhere I am and view my cameras that are in my house. Even though they can't reach the internet, they can reach my VPN.
That's smart.
You can do other things, DNS black holing. So if you don't want to watch ads and stuff when you're on your media devices, that's a thing that you can do. Some media devices don't like it when you turn off commercials.
I noticed.
So yeah, there's all kinds of cool stuff. And if someone is looking to get started to build their own lab, you don't have to go through the barrier of entry of building your own from scratch anymore. You can get a production device that actually runs OpenWRT fairly cheaply from GLINet, and just start learning from there. And it's got the GUI installed, and it's got an even simpler GUI if you aren't ready for that yet. So I actually have a couple of those.
They have OpenWRT GLI nets that are factory flashed.
Oh yeah.
That's all the GLINet is based on OpenWRT.
Yep. Every one of their devices is OpenWRT under the hood.
And they are not shy about it. They do say that right on the website. Big, bold letters.
Yep.
Nice.
Interesting.
I have purchased and broken my share of GLINet devices. Yes.
Those mini bricks?
Yep.
They're not quite
broken
bricks.
or broken in?
They're like rocks.
Yes.
Not bricks.
Adrian, yes. Yes.
The last one I bought, I actually set up as a transparent VPN link to a Fortinet gateway. So I actually had to build an O package for Open FortiClient.
That sounds painful.
It's not. Actually, I automated it, and the CI/CD pipeline for that is on my GitLab.
Nice.
So I don't have to do anything. I just click update software, and it goes and builds itself.
Do they support a VMware or virtual appliance or virtual image kind of out of the gate? I mean, obviously you can install it and build it through VMware, but do they have pre-built ones that you could utilize for home labs?
I don't recall if they have that per se. I feel like they do have stuff and tell you how to load it up on KVM, but I've never tried.
Yeah, that seems like a good use case. That's one of the use cases for pfSense that I leverage a lot of is the virtual environment and just building out quick automated labs for, like you said, things like VPNs, VLANs, breaking VLANs. Those things are kind of hard to emulate with a commercial or enterprise level piece of hardware in a virtual environment that you're trying to test in. So it seems like a good use case for these guys.
Yep. I mean, there's the stuff that you can do with an OpenWRT device. It's kind of endless when it comes to dinking around with the network. I mean, if you wanted to, you can do some packet inspection and TLS unwrapping and all kinds of weird stuff.
So what kind of other cool things are you up to right now, or your company? Like you mentioned, you guys have some interesting products. It'd be kind of cool to hear about some of those.
We have a couple of different OpenWRT based products. This is the VeriHall device that I was talking about that has multiple cell phone modems in it. So that's basically designed to give you a really good mobile network access when maybe you wouldn't be able to get decent mobile network access. And that thing's pretty cool. We also have couple of other products that are based on that. We have NetMax, which is made for like failure conditions. So we talked about the multipath WAN. That's one of the things it does. You know, you hook it up to Wi-Fi, you plug in your Ethernet WAN connection, you hook it up with a mobile modem, and now you've got a connection that's not going to drop. So if you lose one, it just fails over to the other one in real time. So,
nice. Gene, how has the OpenWRT developers and community been recently?
It's been pretty good. So if you go and look at the documentation these days, they've done an awful lot of work. I'd say they did a lot of work cleaning stuff up, but when they had a split years ago where a bunch of developers buggered off and made their own project based on OpenWRT called LEDE.
Yep.
And there was this huge schism in the community for a while, but like they ended up working that out and coming back together under the OpenWRT name. And since then, like I've only seen things improving. The forums are better. The wikis are better and more informative about how to do cool stuff and what you should look at in selecting devices, how to build ode packages and where to find information on cross-compiling stuff. Like, you know, I have compiled kernel modules for my devices at home because I do some weird stuff.
God bless you. Cross compiling is such a pain in the ass.
And kernel modules.
Yes, it is.
Is the GUI still in Lua?
Yeah.
You don't seem too thrilled about that, Gene.
Yeah.
But I mean, you need something small and lightweight to be on all these devices, right? So I get that decision from that vantage point, right?
Yeah. So the interface that you're talking about is Lucy, and it's good for what it does. It does a really good job of controlling the backend API for these, which is the UCI system for OpenWRT, which controls like all of the networking and software that you could possibly want to do on these things. It does a good job at that, but when stuff is written in Lua, it's kind of hard to find people to contribute.
Yeah,
to it.
not the most popular.
And I get it now. Lucy is LUCI. It's Lua UCI.
UCI.
God
right.
damn
And
it.
is there still a drink recipe in all the new releases?
No, they've dropped that.
Oh.
Yeah, when they merged back to LEDE back into OpenWRT, they dropped that stuff.
Oh.
What's the fun in that?
Kamikaze, White Russian.
They're trying to put on their big boy pants and
I get it.
You know, be grown-ups.
That's no fun.
Yeah, I know. I don't like big boy pants either.
Right? Or being a responsible adult.
Yeah.
It's for the birds.
Just pants in general.
Yeah.
Tyler and I think great minds think alike, my friend.
I mean, I don't think Paul's wearing pants right now.
Probably
to
not.
see the top of them.
He's not. He's not. Nope. Neither am I.
That desk isn't just holding up laptops.
There was a lot of
Swing.
a lot of devices that support, like air quotes, support OpenWRT, but like it wasn't for the faint of heart, and like you really shouldn't try. Like, has the community done a good job of like steering people away? Like, yeah, you could get OpenWRT running on this, but it like probably should use something else.
Yeah, I mean, they try to. And the supported devices list that Larry was mentioning that had 3,000 some odd things, like it does a fair job of saying what works and what doesn't, and whether or not it's a healthy build. And then they have the automated build system for all of these. So, you know, when it comes time to do an update, you know, from 19 to 1901 or whatever version release they're on, their automated system just goes for everything. So you can pull down those images, and it's usually as simple as flashing through your, you know, D-Link's web interface or your Linksys's web interface, like you just would do a normal firmware update. So,
yeah, that stuff is amazing now.
And still a lot of binary drivers out there for the Wi-Fi chipsets.
Yeah, they're trying not to as much as they can, but a lot of times they'll give you an option and say, look, we have the binary for this and we have an open source version. The feature sets aren't parallel, but, you know, use the one that works best for your use case. If you're really gung-ho about, everything being open source, or you need a specific feature that you can't get through the binary driver, you know, use the open source version. But a lot of times you're going to get like stuff that is Qualcomm based SOCs, which is the chip that drives the router underneath the hood and makes the Wi-Fi go and all that happy stuff. You know, you're going to have a really hard time getting support for those Qualcomm Atheros wireless devices without the binary driver, because they make it really, really hard.
I never understood the full strategy behind making it a binary blob versus just making it open source. Wouldn't that mean that more people would buy your hardware? You'd think.
I think the thinking of those companies that make the SOCs is that they control what the chip is allowed to do, and they're able to add and remove features as they wish, and basically, you know, keep people from messing with it too much, as opposed to
so it's their legal department. I like it though.
Yeah.
It's your theory is the legal department told them so.
Yes.
Yeah, and maybe you think about also the like the Apple ecosystem. They control the hardware, they control the software, and it should be incredibly stable.
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah. I never agreed.
That is the idea.
Yeah.
I always wanted it to be more open.
Yep.
But then again, you can melt your Wi-Fi, your sock, basically.
You absolutely can.
I mean, you probably still can, even with a binary blob, too, right? I mean, to a certain extent. Well, there's probably stuff in the binary blobs that prevents melting.
You would hope so, but to a certain degree, no, not really.
He said degree.
So, Gene, a question for you: Have you seen this little hardware here? It's small, right? This is the WRT node, the WRT node. Have you seen these?
I haven't had an opportunity to play with those little guys.
So I picked this up from DF Robot. So in the development for the IoT class that we're working on, we're looking for like a router that had a web interface and, you know, all the stuff that we could customize like OpenWRT, and we needed something relatively small and the ability for us to get relatively inexpensively. So
Order 1,000 from China.
Yep, exactly. Turns out these took quite a while to get in. I don't know what their supply chain looks like, but it's an open source, effectively development board that supports OpenWRT. And it was like $12, I think. Somewhere between $6 and $12. We could look it up.
That's pretty cool.
And all is the default board has got, it looks like 2 Wi-Fi antennas and USB, and a bunch of pins on the back. And then they sell a like a breakout board that you plug this thing into, and it's got more USB, and it's got 4 USB ports on it and Ethernet, and it's got a bunch of stuff broken out on a header for SPI, UART. Looks like some other stuff in there too, probably JTAG, and a bunch
SPI?
of
Is SPI like JTAG?
Serial Peripheral Interface.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. That gives you more than just a console. It lets you interface with the hardware.
Yeah, so it's typically hardware to hardware interface.
Yep.
So like if you were going to dump a flash chip, you'd probably dump it over SPI directly to the chip,
Right.
as opposed to going through JTAG.
As
which is
opposed to,
effectively-
because JTAG's a pain in the ass.
Yep. Yes. So I thought
SPI's
that
pain in the ass too, though.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Less of a pain in the ass than JTAG.
Yeah.
Tyler seems to.
Yeah.
You guys can duke it out after the show.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
This is
Depends on
like
what
the
you got,
nerdiest argument ever.
They're both a pain in the ass.
I'm getting blown out of my seat because your propellers are spinning so fast.
Nice. Nice.
That was awesome. Gene, parting thoughts, words, promotion, shameless plugs.
Yeah. So in addition to like the cool toys that we actually make more cool toys, some of which don't run on OpenWRT, but are good for people in the security community. And we also do some managed services, including, red team engagements and remote support and stuff like that. So check out Xcape. We do a lot of fun, cool things. Our products and services lists are on the website. And I'd say if somebody's looking to get started on building their home network, having an OpenWRT device, whether you buy it with OpenWRT or you make it yourself, is a great way to get started and a great platform to start asking questions from.
Sweet.
Nice.
Gene, are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly? I know you've probably been waiting for this entire interview because you've thought about these answers, haven't you?
Maybe I've thought about them for a few years.
Yeah. So, Gene, 3 words to describe yourself.
Hacker, dad, nutty.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Old serial devices, dot matrix printers, robotic arms.
Nice.
Yeah.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Hi, I've got a book, and you can too.
What is your favorite hacker movie?
My favorite hacker movie. You guys are gonna hate me. Hackers.
No, I love you for that. See, I'm on Team Hackers here.
I love Hackers. It came to me at just the right time when I was already feeling inspired to learn about the stuff, and then they made it look really cool, and I was like, oh, I want to be that cool.
They did make it look really cool.
In the popular game of pick 2 celebrities
to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Thanks, Lee.
Okay, that one's a little harder. I've been trying to think about that for a while.
But now you've only got 10 seconds.
Let's see.
And
David
why
Bowie,
is it Ryan
Marilyn
Reynolds
Monroe.
and Hugh
Could be a
Jackman?
pretty.
David Bowie and Marilyn Monroe.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Gene, thank you so much for appearing on Paul's Security Weekly.
It's great being here, guys. Thanks.
Thanks, Gene.
Stay tuned. Coming up next, Rob from CyCognito. Stick around. Keeping up with security issues across thousands of web assets without the right approach to web application security is a daunting task. Get ahead with web vulnerability scanning automation from NetSparker, a leader in dynamic and interactive application security testing known for its ease of use and accurate results. Detect a wide range of vulnerabilities in all legacy and modern web applications, address security bugs at scale by automating the confirmation process, automatically prioritize vulnerabilities, and assign actionable tickets to the right developers in their native workflows for rapid remediation. For more information on how to scale application security with ease, visit securityweekly.com/NetSparker. Cybercriminals are using social engineering loaded with urgency and fear to successfully prey on victims, your employees, or your customers. Protect your Office 365 email from today's most sophisticated attacks with Barracuda Email Threat Scanner. It's a free tool to help protect your business from these hard-to-detect attacks. The Barracuda Email Threat Scanner uses artificial intelligence to hunt and eliminate Office 365 email threats. Find the cybersecurity threats hiding in your Office 365 email right now. Get your free email threat scan at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. We're more than happy to announce that we'll be at InfoSec World in 2021 in person, October 25th through the 27th. This year, our annual partnership with InfoSec World is extra special as we're both part of the same company, the Cyber Risk Alliance. What does that mean for Security Weekly listeners and InfoSec World attendees? Well, you get to see and hear from many of the Security Weekly team at the event, and you save 20% off your World Pass. Please visit securityweekly.com/ISW2021 to register with our discount code. This segment is sponsored by CyCognito. Joining us from CyCognito is Rob Gurzeev, CEO and co-founder. Rob has led the development of offensive security solutions for both the private sector and intelligence agencies. Prior to founding CyCognito, he was the CTO of the product department of the 8200 Israeli Intelligence Corps. Today, he joins us to discuss protecting the attack surface. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Nice to have you on, Rob. And I'm very excited, actually. I don't know if you knew that Adrian Sanabria was also here with us. And Adrian and I collaborated. Mostly Adrian did the product reviews, where we tested your product as well as many, many others, and really liked your product a lot. So securityweekly.com/reviews, right? It's where you can find that first lab test that we did.
Yeah, these reviews were actually really good. I think it was maybe the first time that I at least saw a review of like 8-10 pages with both technical assessment and some business aspects and value prop aspects of the solution. So that was awesome to have, and glad that you got the results you got and the bottom line you got, which was really helpful with a bunch of conversations we had.
And I think, we all, yourself included, Rob, asked the same question when we talk about attack surface management. We're like, why haven't we solved this problem sooner? And I'm always like, why isn't everyone doing this? I don't understand. Yeah. This is an awesome thing. We should do this, right?
Yeah, no, it's funny, I actually had, and this is a funny story. So when I talked to Dima, my co-founder and CTO today, about this about 4 years ago, and I told him, look, companies don't know their attack surface. Attackers are seeing and are targeting these weak spots, but the security teams have no idea. They have to deploy all of these security solutions, but then it's problematic. It's a huge problem that the security team and attackers are seeing different things. And he asked me the same question. He asked me, how come it's not solved? In fact, he said, I don't believe you. Of course, he was joking, but he said, I don't believe it. There's no way it hasn't been solved yet, because we're having this problem for 20 plus years. Now, interestingly, it has become exponentially more painful, I believe, in the industry's defense, call it. It has become exponentially more painful over the last 10 years as companies move to the cloud. Networks have become increasingly more complex, the tech stack of companies became more complex, and companies now have between thousands and millions of assets exposed to the internet. And that became a huge problem that, interestingly enough, cannot be solved with legacy technologies that most vendors are still using today.
Yeah, I think that's evidenced by when in the pen testers in the virtual room, right, will most likely attest to this, that when you start a penetration test, oftentimes before you have the first meeting with the client, you can tell them about stuff in their attack surface that they didn't know about. And that always blew me away. I'm like, why aren't we solving this problem?
Right, absolutely. And what was really odd to us as engineers coming from intelligence agencies is, if you have a target like ISIS, right, or Al-Qaeda or Boko Haram, you can't ask them to deploy these agents or virtual machines in their networks. Or maybe you can ask them, but they will probably not comply. And they will definitely not tell you about their org structure, affiliates, IP ranges, and what have you. But every vendor out there today is asking the customer, the security team, for deploying technologies or for all of these input. And we believe that actually creates many blind spots that then get companies compromised. And that was our main mission, to solve this gap between what attackers are seeing and what the vendors or security solutions are seeing. And the specific reason I personally believe it hasn't been solved yet is because the industry is progressing in a really incremental way. You have Nmap built in the 90s, right? We all know Nmap, and in a sense, love Nmap, right? It was built in the 90s, and when you had a few servers connected to the internet and much smaller networks, it was fine. But 99% of the technologies out there, you can really see like the evolution from Nmap to visualized Nmap results with some CVE information that is based on Nmap type of data, and you simply cannot solve certain problems with that kind of incremental evolution.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like back in the day, the reason we didn't scan from the outside in is because we didn't have a cloud, and it was actually costly to stand something up. Now the problem today is that we have the clouds. We have cloud infrastructure, so we can stand something on the outside, but we can stand up a whole bunch of stuff that increases our attack surface.
Right. No, I think that's a great point. I mean, building technology like ours 10 years ago would have cost literally tens of millions of dollars just to run. So that's absolutely true. And also technologies like graph data models, right? They were not scalable at all, or were much more difficult to scale 10 years ago. When you look at companies like Palantir and others that were some of the first ones to try and implement this kind of data models and databases to solve more complex problems. That's an interesting evolution as an industry. And in that sense, by the way, the cybersecurity industry is actually 10 years behind the rest of the industry, or many tech areas like Google and AWS, ad companies, marketing companies, which have to deal with much bigger scale, and where the buyer is also asking certain quantifiable questions, where you can't just tell the customer, hey, we'll scan 1% or 30% of your network and it will be fine. It wouldn't fly in any other industry, but it does in cybersecurity. And we actually have a problem with that as people. And we strongly believe that the industry should change that. And it seems like more and more CISOs and others, CIOs, get that and want to drive that change.
So are we in a different place than we were, say, 10 or 20 years ago? It seems like we are in a complexity conundrum where we have more data, we have more endpoints, we have more visibility needs, we have big data and AI, but we've also added so many layers of complexity and scalability in order to facilitate all of these other IT and business units as we move forward. From a security standpoint, it seems like we are behind the curve at least 10 years, and we haven't adopted or gotten much past what Nmap is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the reasons for that is that unlike, say, sales tools, marketing tools, and others, where things are not static, but are not changing that fast. In cybersecurity, there are new IoT devices, new cloud solutions every month and you need to protect more types of data, more and more complex and different network architectures. And so much effort is invested in just making the deployments easier in these new environments so that very little or small amounts of R&D is actually going towards leveraging modern machine learning capabilities, NLP capabilities to solve some of these problems. For example, some of the first investments we made at CyCognito were things like leveraging assets, content and context to understand what they are. So when you look at these millions of assets, you can't look at millions of IP addresses or open ports, right, and figure out what this is. But by leveraging certain keywords and other elements, visual elements within web interfaces and other things, you can actually figure out that this is a payment mechanism because of these and these keywords and these MasterCard and Visa visual elements and these network links to these other companies' assets and to the Visa website. And you can also understand by running active tests against that machine that there is an SQL injection vulnerability, exposing the customer's financial information, right? So if you go to the bottom line insight, the CEO of this company wants to know that their customers' financial data is exposed. That's a critical business insight, something you must know. But no combination of network port scanners, CVE scanners, and the like can solve this problem. You have to leverage technologies like NLP and machine learning to automatically at scale finding these kind of third-party components even, and your subsidiaries' assets, and the millions of assets you've got all across the world, and then understand what they are, say payment mechanisms, production, critical databases, and others, and then also contextualize the risk. For example, you have customers' data exposed here, or these dozens of credentials of your own and others' databases on this AWS directory. So from how do I operationalize it perspective, there is a night and day difference. And that's what I'm talking about when I say you can solve these problems by incrementally improving Nmap, like adding a big map or some information about the IP range, or guess what CVEs might be there based on the software's version. That simply doesn't get you there. And the bigger and more complex the attack surface is, the clearer it is to security teams that it doesn't scale. And as they're getting attacked more and more, and many companies are also getting breached, they start to care more about that business problem.
And does that take into context things like SaaS applications and disparate data where the company is leveraging multiple platforms in order to manage the scalability? It seems like we've got to make light year jumps and keep up with technology, but we keep ending up in a circular, redundant thing where we bring all of our stuff into our internal network, protect that, then we take it out to a virtual environment, then we're back to a thin client and some VDI, and now we're out to like SaaS applications and making that disperse. Does this scale along with that and provide context around what is core central and centric to business importance and business fundamentals out in the SaaS applications as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also a great point. For example, we've helped many Fortune 500 companies learn about knowledge management systems and many others, SaaS applications that the security team didn't even know they have. And using our automated pen testing capabilities, we have found, for example, Okta solutions that were misconfigured because of various reasons that exposed or led to the exposure of API keys and sensitive information. So again, that's another great example of something that an Nmap or a vulnerability scanner simply cannot do. It's not their mission. They were not built to do it. And there's no incremental improvement that can happen to let them do it. And on the other hand, to your point, if I'm a CEO or a CIO or a CISO, I don't care. I just need to know about that risk.
And Rob, I think it's also interesting how you discover some of this information, because I think there's a lot of theories and even some practice where I could implement one of these techniques. And what you've done inside the product, I think one of the reasons it impresses me, if you kind of blended these together and taken, lack of a better term, best of breed. One of those things that we did an RSA interview actually just over a year ago, and it stuck with me when you talked about how you look on the web for images, right? We all know we can use something like TinEye and find usages of images, and you were like, yeah, that's like training wheels, Paul. like what you guys are. Can you explain a little bit how you do the image analysis to discover some of this other infrastructure like SaaS services?
Yeah, sure thing. So if you take examples like these payment mechanism, which is the easiest example probably. So you have certain files like the logo of MasterCard or Visa, or if you think about a Cisco gateway, which is another very common example. Let's take the Cisco gateway. So you'll have this IT company here or this partner of your customer, this company, this target company. And that Cisco ASA, for example, can be vulnerable and exploitable. Now, if you're a hacker, right, you'll be able to see that you have in the title something like connect to network X of that other company. You'll have various elements in the web interfaces HTML that will tell you what product this is, and also some other elements. And you'll be able to see in some cases the other company's logo. And you'll even see elements like this drop-down list that includes some of the other companies' networks names, like production environment X or partners platform Y. So if you're a hacker and you're in front of that web interface, it's clear to you that this gateway connects this company with these other companies' networks or even specific solutions and data. And if it's exploitable, that's a path of least resistance into the other company's stuff. So you're in a great position. But if we go back again to the Nmap and vulnerability scanners and the alike conversations, there is no way they can do it, and there is no incremental improvement that can get you there. So when you're building a platform that is based on a graph data model that represents the organization, not just the network, but the organization, and you can represent in that graph data model also complex connections that say, for example, this company acquired this other company 2 years ago. Here is the evidence, and this subsidiary is using this cloud asset over here. And this is vulnerable in this way and is exposing this kind of data. So if you have that graph data model, and if you marry, and we strongly believe that companies should do that, if you marry attack surface management with automatic security testing, which is the only way to protect an attack surface, you can start with your UI. And when you talk to this customer, you can start with the bottom line insights about that data exposure or that attack vector that starts from this gateway and ends in your development environment of this product or this department, which is really what you want to know from a business perspective, versus the legacy approach that some companies that were established in the 90s are still using, which is you tell us what IP ranges you want to scan. We will look at the software versions and we'll tell you about thousands of critical issues you have or might have based on these software versions.
Now,
And
is that utilizing like AI and the ML, like pathing and relationships? You said you guys are using like graph databases. Now, each of those is going to have a very complex node and endpoint relational things that may be disparate data, but leveraging that with something like AI and providing the pathing, is that how you guys are managing those complex relationship values and then figuring out those multiple paths or multiple avenues to the disparate datas?
exactly. That's actually quite complex, but you got it right. So we use Bayesian algorithms that, for example, look at these dozens of databases, Google search results, many companies' websites, and they create these 1,000 hypotheses by hypothesis about this company acquiring this other company that has this kind of an asset. And there is a score of likelihood to any such assumption based on the amount and type and reliability of the sources for this machine learning engine. And that's how you calculate and build out this graph of organizations and assets, and based on the security testing element, also risk, where you have a confidence score for everything, and you can see like the cause root analysis for everything you're seeing. So you're not just told, hey, you have these random, thousands of critical vulnerabilities and these IP addresses, go figure it out. But you can see the map and the quote unquote machine's thought process behind the conclusion or the insight.
So you're able to make a business decision, business risk, based off of multiple layers of scores and confidence that then calculate into those path and relation. That's freaking phenomenal.
And the beauty in Bayesian algorithms is, they're not random in the sense that the machine gives you this conclusion, but then you can't understand why it reached that conclusion, which is the major challenge with most machine learning algorithms and AI capabilities. And the other huge advantage is it actually learns from the user. So over time, it becomes better based on the user's input.
Joff, comments, questions? I know a lot of this is in your wheelhouse.
Oh, yes. I just managed to unmute myself. So one of the key things is what you said at the end there. The fact that you're learning and refining the models based on the user input is incredibly important. I mean, that's honestly how Google has their success, right? I mean, to keep feeding the machine and keep refining the models is everything. So I don't have any specific questions. I'm really, I think Tyler's like covered everything pretty much.
I think that's a great comment, by the way. And I'll add one more random anecdote. So Dima, my co-founder, was a co-founder and also an architect in a bunch of companies for 20 years. And there's tremendous importance in that experience, because if you don't have that mission in mind from day one, you will not build the relevant data models, infrastructure, and development tools in the first 2 or 3 years in the company that will allow you to get there. You'll be stuck with the Nmap data model where you have IP ranges, open ports, CVEs, and that's it. So all of the innovation you can do in that case, starting from year 3, is making the UI nicer, adding more graphs, building integrations. But that's it, even in year 8 or 10.
Executive summaries.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really. No, you're absolutely you're dead on, because it's not really adding anything other than pretty stuff to the product, and that only takes you so far. But to have that vision ahead of time, this is where I really want this thing to go, and build that foundation. That's everything.
Yeah, and I can also share as a founder, when you start a company, your investors, and we have great investors from Lightspeed and Accel. So they get it, but most investors don't understand why you need to invest these tens of millions of dollars in R&D, and you see certain investments fruits just in year 2 or 3 or 4. For example, in this area, there's no way to bring significant results within less than 2 years of building these algorithms and working closely with customers on getting them right and get to the right precision balance. So building the team right, having the right investors and partners as a part of this process, and know that this is your mission from day one was also key for us, and I think for any company that wants to solve such problems.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really interesting comment, actually, because it's a trap that a lot of people unfortunately fall into, and I think it's a product of the venture capital industry, that they push you for results so quickly that if you've got a much longer term strategic kind of plan, that's not going to fit, right? It's not going to be something that those venture capitalist folks are going to necessarily tolerate. So it's really important, just like you said, to find the right investors that are looking at that long-term horizon.
Sorry, hold on.
I have a question around
hold on, Tyler. Yeah, Adrian, did you have a question?
Well, Tyler can go ahead if he I was going to kind of take it back in more of a technical direction and share some of my insights, but you can go ahead, Tyler.
Right.
I can.
Tyler, then Adrian.
After that.
Adrian, you're not fitting in on the show, buddy. You got to just hop in there and take it over. That's how it works.
I'm just being polite.
That's your problem.
Trying to.
Well, there's your problem right there.
The data modeling and improvement and telemetry as this moves forward. Have you guys figured out, and are you acquiring a lot of the telemetry from customers? Obviously, hopefully that's sanitized and or anonymized, but those data models are continuously being rebuilt upon based on the current threat landscape as that telemetry is being fed back into the system. That's right?
Yeah, so that's actually a great point. I can share that we have recently built various integrations to take some of the internal network context and knowledge to amplify what our engines are able to find and add more context to it. And also, if you're these attack surface protection analyst, de facto probably a SOC team member, vulnerability management team member, or a threat hunter, and you need to, or you're trying to map your company's attack surface, you need to leverage today literally dozens of DNS and IOC and so many other databases and data sources, and write your own scripts to make some sense out of all of it. And we built our data model from day one so that we can, and we are, leveraging such sources so that the platform gives you the insights about the assets, about the risk, about the security grading, that also helps you focus, by the way, on the 10 security gaps that generate 90% of the risk versus thousands of alleged critical issues. But we believe that there's importance in leveraging such data points to give the customer, the security team, these insights and conclusions versus data dumping random things on the security team, which I think was the general approach for many years. And many VCs finance, literally thousands of companies creating all sorts of data. But I think that as an industry, we're now getting to the point where consolidation starts. And I believe that the few companies that will be able to best leverage the many dozens and maybe even hundreds of data sources to generate the best insights and operationalize them so that incidents and communication are automatically created will be some of the top companies and vendors in the industry in 5 or 7 years.
So you can do more than I can do with pulling down those tools and using grep, right? Is that the crux of it? That's what I went to when you talked about, I can get one tool that does this and one tool that does this and pull down some data. and you use some scripting to, I can only get so far doing that, right? I think you and I talked about this, Rob, right? Like I can't get to the next level where I can operationalize it.
Absolutely, and we are talking to and we've onboarded a bunch of Fortune 100 companies and others that have been building such solutions for years, by the way, based on these dozens of data sources and then a lot of scripting. But when we run a POC with them and show them their own attack surface, what we're seeing is we were able to see between 30 to 70% more assets. And even in the POC, we usually show them at least 5 or 10 ways to get into some networks and some applications data that in many cases they haven't even heard of. And obviously you cannot protect what you don't know. And by the way, that's a good question for us as an industry, right? How come we've got to the point where it's legitimate and makes sense to run vulnerability scanning, for example, on 30% of the network, or a pen test on 1% of the network, simply because it costs too much. So you, customer, will be fine, we hope, with us testing just these 5 applications, even though you have thousands of assets and thousands or hundreds of web applications. I mean,
yeah. And Rob, I would argue that there's still value in doing that for different reasons, and that you need attack surface management to know about all of those things so that you can deal with them, because it might be different, right? And pen testing still has its value, so does vulnerability scanning, right?
Yeah.
But without an attack surface monitoring, like, you're at a significant disadvantage, in my opinion.
Of course, I'm talking about quite a different thing, actually. I'm talking about, we should run vulnerability scanning on 100% of the assets versus 30%, which is, for example, our approach and what we're doing with our customers. And 2, regarding pen testing, I think there is tremendous importance in the manual pen testing and reverse engineering, definitely. But that should be focused, these last mile pen testing, or the last 10% of the pen test that is the most difficult to do, should be focused on the areas that are the most vulnerable and exposed and attractive to attackers, versus being picked as a random project because I remember that we launched this new product last month, so that can be a target. And I was asked in the last board meeting about this other environment, so I'll also run a pen test over there, but not in the other 100 environments. And if I'll be asked as a CISO, for example, hey, how did you pick these targets? I will not have a great explanation. And that would not fly, I believe, like in insurance, right? You would not insure your living room just because that's the first room in the house that you see when you enter the house.
And I think that's it makes sense. When you do a pen test, I mean, it's expensive. You want them to focus on the stuff that matters the most. But I wanted to touch a little bit on like how you get from that 30 or 70%, in addition to the rest of the stuff there, because that's what I found really fascinating when we started to dig into this market. And when me and Paul were talking about what to do the product reviews on first, this market, like, we knew enough about it to be interested in it, but there were just so many companies there popping up, and we didn't really understand what they're doing. And I think everybody kind of views this market from what they know, and most people know Shodan or Census, which is basically a scan of the entire internet, and for a small fee, or maybe for free in a limited way, you can query their scan of the internet. And I think the biggest thing, that kind of shocked me that I didn't realize was going on was what I ended up calling seed discovery, because I don't know what else to call it. But, this idea that, what we're missing is the whole point. We're scanning the stuff we know about, but that's the whole problem, is this other 30 to 70% that we don't know about. So how do we find out about that? And first, running a tool like CyCognito, one of the first things you're presented with are domain names you've never heard of before. And you're like, oh, this must be a mistake. How did this end up in my results in this tool? And, it actually shows you, well, the way we found this is you gave us the name of a company, and we found these DNS names from that. And then we did some DNS brute forcing, and we found some subdomains of that. And then on the web page, on one of those subdomains, we scraped that web page and found another DNS name. And there's this string, and it basically reads like a pen test report, like how a pen tester will find their way from point A to point Z. And all of a sudden, about these domains that, were registered 5 years ago. Somebody set up a proof of concept or something like that, completely forgot about it, abandoned it. And of course, that's where you're going to get popped, because everyone's forgotten it exists.
Yep. Or we didn't know, because, and several reasons we started with the domains that we thought we knew about, because under CRA, right, there's like 5 companies that were acquired in 18 months. And we're like, I bet you no one really knows exactly what we own. I'm like, right. Adrian, I did some cursory looks, and here's what I think. Yeah, here's what I think. Here's what I think we own. Like right? That, right? Here's what I think we've got. And CyCognito was, just one of the tools. And there were others as well, but CyCognito did a great job of like. Adrian was like, "Hey, do you know we have this?" I'm like, "Nope, had no idea."
I think that's a great point that I'm glad you raised. And I was also glad, not surprised, but glad to read where you wrote that CyCognito found more unique and interesting findings than any other vendor, which I think is the exact quote. But yes, I think the way we see it, there are 2 other types of vendors out there. One that we call port scanners, solutions, tools like Shodan and Census that will literally show you a port scanning data or a little bit more than port scanning data on literal IP addresses that you're looking for. And so that is something that anyone can afford, but it doesn't scale in any way, and it does not solve the security blind spots problem by definition. Doesn't show you a single bit of information on anything that you're not already proactively searching for. And then there are quote unquote attack surface management companies where if they're not of the first type, then they have literally analysts searching for IP ranges that they believe that you might own, or they ask you for your input, which is like a managed Shodan service. Sometimes it has some more information than just port scanning, but that's the essence of it. And what we've learned from these own companies or various sources of information is that running a single POC in a full-blown mode takes between 4 to 6 weeks that way and costs them tens of thousands of dollars on human labor alone to run that POC. So that's a one point in time effort of attack surface mapping that is manual, is based on this Nmap data model where you simply have IP ranges that are tagged as yours, and it doesn't change over time. These IP ranges don't change over time. So the problem is that as new networks are being deployed, new cloud assets are being acquired, extended, and so on, and you acquire new companies, you divest companies.
Yeah. Now, let me stop you there real quick, because that's a great example. And that's a great way to talk about how this product is so different from, because that was one section of the report was how is this different from an external vulnerability scanner? And acquisitions is a great example. Like you've got a tool here where you can initially tell it one and your company can acquire another company, and this tool will figure that out on its own. Like, how many tools do you have in your security portfolio that on their own figure out that you've acquired another company and start looking for issues in that acquired company?
Absolutely. And some of our customers, like Bertelsmann and Tesco and others, literally have hundreds of departments, subsidiaries, facilities all over the world. Great companies, by the way, and great security teams. So with a port scanner, it's not even painful to do it manually. It's impossible. Of course, especially in cybersecurity, and especially if you don't ask the business-oriented questions, you can do anything. You can scan 10 servers and feel like you're doing a good job, or scanning this one environment for compliance, say you're compliant because you haven't scanned or you're not protecting or monitoring or assessing the 100 other environments. But to your point, Adrian, which I think is an important one, a super important one, as a CISO or as a CEO, are you focused on protecting the company or checking these boxes? Because you can check all of these boxes easily by scanning even 100 assets. The vulnerability scanning point, the pen testing point, risk management point. You can use security ratings to feel that you have a good grasp of what your third parties are doing based on the number of open ports they have. But 9 out of 10 CISOs don't want to trust these sources for risk management. And by the way, that's also something that has changed in my perspective over the last few years alone.
So taking that point, I got a quick question around, this definitely scales well, and this provides great visibility from a C-level and very large company in asset management. Does it also scale down? We see a huge risk in not just SMBs, but maybe high equity or companies that have a small footprint for users or staff, but have high volumes of monetary value. Does this scale down to those kind of clients as well?
Like a company of like 60 people that acquired a
that
bunch
might be
of companies.
us,
That might
which
be,
is what
might
we
be us.
did the testing.
Yeah, so actually,
yes,
that's a great point, Adrian. Adrian, if you want to share your thoughts with regard to what you've seen, feel free to. Or I'll just start by saying that we have customers that are even startups that don't have a security team, but must protect their data, their customers' data, right? And we had one of our customers, a security company, had, for example, many customers' security names exposed by subdomains, and they had no idea. And we had another big startup customer also in the security realm where they had one of the top firewalls vendors being misconfigured in a way it was using a 25 years old encryption that can be literally disencrypted with a cell phone. So the answer is yes, although I will say that generally speaking, the attack surface protection challenge is becoming bigger exponentially as the attack surface is bigger and more complex. But it's true that for these SMBs and SMEs that have tiny security teams, they are definitely looking for automated solutions to these problems and not, scanners and tools they have to run manually and make all of the decisions by themselves.
Yeah, and Tyler, I'll give you an example of that too. I knew from speaking with people inside of our company that we were using certain technologies and SaaS providers, right? I could have gone and looked for those on my own without knowing that. Probably would have taken me quite some time. And then Adrian would show me the results. And he's like, do you know we had this? I'm like, yeah, I think I heard that like in a meeting somewhere, right? He's like, this is where we have it, how it's configured, and this is how it was discovered. So that was really cool.
Yeah, and I think another SME, a small company with, I think, 1,000, 2,000, well, relatively small company with 1,000 or 2,000 employees, had a partner in China that had this server that was exploitable, led to their network, and they didn't even know about that partner, for example. So that definitely happens in any and every scale.
Mm.
Yeah. And so just to, touch on some of the challenges that tools run into in this area is that when you're going down that rabbit hole and you're chasing those connections, between systems, you're eventually going to find some third-party systems. And one of the interesting things there is that you find out some of the things that those third parties are doing with your data that you might not have known about.
Yeah, that's
so-
interesting, Adrian. I think sometimes we found stuff that was a vulnerability or exposure in the third party that related
Yes,
to us that
we did.
necessarily
We
we
found
couldn't
several.
control, right? Yeah, that
we
was
found several, and it's interesting because at first I'm like, oh, this tool would be better if it tuned this stuff out, and then like, wait a minute, like, no, that's actually something we'd want to know about, and probably contact that third party and tell them to fix their stuff.
Yeah, and security teams are doing it, and it's actually another great point, because if you have this partner and he's putting you and your data at risk, for example, your marketing team is employing this other company to build you this website or this marketing campaign, and you have source code and API keys and other things exposed on these other companies' Git server that happens to be exposed to attackers and expose this sensitive information.
Rob,
Do you
I
want
think
to-
that was one of the biggest findings for me. Now that I think about it, really scary, because the amount of development websites, right? Like when you, like you said, you commission someone to build a web property for you, you tend to underestimate like how much infrastructure is built to do the dev and QA and testing in push to production, and you end up with 3 or 4 copies, of that website. And a lot of times, as Adrian and I discovered, they don't take that stuff down, right? Because they could still be actively working on or the worst case is they're not, and they just left it up and running.
They forgot about it.
Yeah, and the other question is, what is this third party measured by? They're not measured by how secure their dev environment or even that marketing campaign is.
Yeah.
And the other question is this company's security team proactively tests such environments, where the answer is pretty much always no.
Yep. Also makes
in
me
general,
want to.
I've got this theory that, and it's more than a theory. I actually recommend it as a metric for security programs to track the average age of assets that you have.
Right.
And generally, I think that the older that average age gets, maybe this is a bit ageist for assets. I don't know if assets care about that kind of thing, but generally the younger they are, the less vulnerable they are.
Right.
Like
But
you
also
run into
the least-
DevOps teams that change passwords on systems like once an hour or something like that, and like they talk about not having an instance running in the cloud that's older than maybe a week or something like that. Like everything gets refreshed on a regular basis, not just for security. It helps security out a lot, but for performance also.
I was also going to say, age coupled with.
You don't have to worry about memory leaks if your instance doesn't run longer than X amount of hours.
Age coupled with frequency of use too. Because I mean, it's one thing to have an old asset out there. It's another thing to have an old asset that, like, if you look at the logs, it's not really being used. And I find that with like a lot of our domains specifically. I'm like, if I had looked at the frequency and usage of our domains in some way, or other kinds of cloud assets, the ones that aren't getting a lot of traffic probably aren't getting a lot of attention from IT or the dev teams either, which means it's ripe for the taking in a subdomain takeover, for example.
Absolutely. And we actually built modules to detect exactly these kind of cases, like assets that have really old SSL certificates, or the content seems to have been built 5, 10, 15 years ago and not updated since, or are using just a really old tech stack. And we create a security gap type for them that is called abandoned assets. So you can simply review these and potentially shut them down on the spot. Like we have these telecom customers that literally had a server in their internal network that was accidentally exposed to the internet, and it was there for 15 years. It was actually used as a coffee table in one of their offices. And no one had the guts to disconnect the damn thing from the network. But that was the path of least resistance into their network, for example.
I totally, if I worked there, would have spilled coffee on it by now.
Accidentally.
Yeah, accidentally.
That's another type of security.
That's right. That's funny, though, because we hear the old fables of servers being built into walls in universities. That's the first time I'd heard the coffee table.
Oh. That's funny.
It's awesome. Now everyone's thinking about infrastructure they may have forgotten about, right? That's usually when we conclude this, you're like,
I'm just thinking about building a computer into my coffee table.
A coffee table, right?
See, I went the other way with that.
Yeah. I want to SSH in Larry's coffee table.
Yeah.
As soon as we went through that discussion, I just SSH'd around.
Yeah, and Adrian, I would love to also hear your thoughts. One question from me after doing these 10 reviews or so, with respect to security grading and prioritization, and how do you operationalize this? So what are some of your learnings from that reviews you did?
Everyone gets an F.
Yeah, no. We specifically did not give letter grades to companies here, but I think you're talking about like within the vulnerability risk program, right?
Right.
In that context.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, how do I find can you find using this solution the top 10 risks that are meaningful?
So you said at the beginning here, and I think it's important enough to call out again, that this should be feeding into other tools. I could definitely see these tools replacing external vulnerability scanning at some point. But still at this point, there are things that those scanners are going to find that you guys aren't going to find, and you're obviously finding stuff that they're not. So for, in the meantime, they absolutely should be feeding into one another. And, I think, increasingly as we go forward, we're going to see, products like, Kenna, and, we just saw Brinkwell raise some money recently. There's going to be these systems that all the risk and vulnerability stuff kind of feed into in one place, so that you can kind of get that overall view of, okay, what should I be worried about? And, with products like these, 100% of it is externally accessible. So already you've got that important context there. This is stuff exposed to the public internet. So already all of it gets that big, plus jump in criticality, because anybody can reach out and touch it, mess with it, hack it, whatever.
I think for me, Rob, and Adrian and I had this awesome discussion about okay, if we were in charge of the company's security and we're the CISO or lead security team, what would we do to assess the perimeter and the attack surface? And I'm like, I don't think I'd use vuln scanners for that anymore. I just wouldn't. I would use attack surface management and monitoring tools, and that would get me almost all the way there, and I'd operationalize that. And then, the other stuff we know about and that you can secure in different ways. My vuln scanning program would just use agents because I know about that stuff and I control it, right? My web apps that I develop, I'm going to secure in a totally different way in my SDLC, and there's many points that you can do that. I'm from the outside in, I'm this is the tool that, I would use.
Yeah, and that's also where, to your end, to Adrian's points, that's where consolidation comes into place, because if you're using an ASM solution, a high-quality ASM solution, and a vulnerability scanner that costs $3 to $10 per IP per year for the external attack surface, and then you also want to use a Kenna-like solution, you end up paying between $1 and $1.5 million, sometimes even more, in an enterprise. And not many companies are willing to pay that. And that's why consolidating these capabilities, which also creates many other efficiencies, I believe is what's going to happen, because it's just so inefficient to use this scanner here, this data source there, this other solution that simply can integrate a few things and add some threat intelligence to it. That's not efficient. You can think of Salesforce as a combination of 20 different tools. Yeah. And when it is the case, Salesforce builds that or expands into that area.
Yeah, because for me, it's not so much about the vulnerabilities. It's about the fact that it exists. That's more important to me, because typically if it's exposed and discoverable out there on the internet, it's something I need to secure. And the fact that it has vulnerabilities or not, obviously, if you can find vulnerabilities in them, that's going to help with the priority. But to me, that's not the goal. The goal is defining it and discovering it.
Right, absolutely. And there are many risks, by the way, that vulnerability scanners simply cannot find, like data exposure, web application security gaps, where these DAST scanners are not scalable for many reasons. So yeah, these are things, some tactical yet super important gaps that you really need to know the space to understand why that's reality. So when you look at a data set of this kind of product, you realize that, okay, these guys can help me solve this problem. But it's hard for many to build that architecture in their mind to completely solve this problem and not end up depending on dozens of different tools and data sources.
Rob,
Some people might argue that they could find them, but there's no corresponding CV, so they just don't care.
yeah, that's certainly a thing. It's not all about the CVEs, right? Rob, I
Right.
just have 5 questions for you. Are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Sure. I don't know if I'll succeed, but I'll try.
Well, there's no right
Right
or wrong
answers,
answer,
yes.
so yeah, you'll be fine. Rob, 3 words to describe yourself.
Wow.
That's one.
That's a good one.
Builder, curiosity-oriented person, and I guess a hacker.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Vulnerability scanners, just because they're so painful.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Poacher becomes gatekeeper.
What's your favorite hacker movie?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have any. I was quite disappointed from the few that I saw. But funnily enough, there was one, what's it called? There was an episode on South Park about web intelligence that was really funny. I don't
that's
remember
awesome.
what
I'm going to have to
episode
go
it
look
was.
that one up. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
I like
It is a
that.
good
Yeah,
answer.
we'll take it. We'll take it.
Rob, choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fiction,
Live,
or
dead,
otherwise.
fictional or otherwise.
Wow. I have no idea. For this one, I literally have no answer.
They can be silly celebrities.
Maybe, I don't know. I have no idea. That one is a tough.
I don't know as an answer. Like I said, there's no right or wrong
Yeah,
answer. So,
yeah,
Rob,
absolutely.
thank you very much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly.
Yeah, it was awesome, and look forward to the next time.
Me too. For folks that want to learn more, you can visit securityweekly.com/CyCognito to learn all about attack surface management. Up next is the security news. Stay tuned. Can you pinpoint the 10 security gaps in your attack surface that account for 90% of your risk? It's impossible using a combination of scanners, pen tests, breach and attack simulation tools, and manual processes. But attackers can find your gaps. They perform recon and target the weaknesses with the best return. The CyCognito platform sees your external attack surface the way attackers do, eliminating blind spots. Powered by a global bot network, the CyCognito platform prioritizes your highest risk security gaps, integrates with existing workflows, and reduces operational costs. Visit securityweekly.com/CyCognito. Qualys has brought together vulnerability management and patch management, letting security teams discover vulnerabilities and apply patches immediately, all within a single, unified app. Sign up for a free trial of Qualys VMDR, vulnerability management, detection, and response today at securityweekly.com/Qualys. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. We are ecstatic to announce that Security Weekly Unlocked will be in person December 5th through the 8th at the Hilton Lake Buena Vista. Call for presentations and early registration for Security Weekly listeners is open now. You may visit securityweekly.com/unlocked, submit your presentation, and register for the early registration price before it expires. On to the security news. The hot and sweaty Mr. Joff Thayer is here with us as well. Joff, welcome.
Why is it that I'm hot and sweaty?
I don't know. That's what everyone was telling me. You're hot and sweaty, so I went with it.
Wait, I gotta show the guns.
Look out! The guns are out. Guns are out.
The guns. Yeah, there it is.
So that's just more.
Yeah, it is
just
great
one
to
more.
be here.
Now we're all hot and sweaty.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm relieved to see you.
It's glad you're
Joff is also ecstatic.
relieved. You're relieved for yourself.
That's what you call a catharsis there, Joff.
A catharsis.
Catharsis.
Hey, you know what? I'm so excited because next week I got to do a plug now. Next week is Way West Hackin' Fest. We're going to be in Reno, Nevada. We're super excited.
This is a hot and sweaty plug.
It's a hot and sweaty plug. I'm literally getting on a plane for the first time in like 18 months or so. I think it was February when I last got on a plane. And flying out west, and me and Tyler, he's going to be there, and Lee's going to be there. We're just going to have a great time. It's going to be good.
You guys have fun. It's going to be awesome.
We're jealous.
We are.
Mm-hmm.
There will be sweaty hugs.
There will be sweaty.
There's still
hugs.
plane tickets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ooh.
I mean, you probably show up.
Call to the community.
They'd let you in the
Still
door.
time to register. Make sure you go do that. Is it wildwesthackinfest.com? Is that the website?
Yeah, I think that's the website. And if not, you can search for Wild West, Way West. There's too many W's.
It's a lot of
I think
W's.
it's Wild West Hackfest, but whatever.
Either way, Google will
You'll
get
find
you
it.
there.
You'll find
Google.
it. I'm confident
will
our
get you
audience
there.
can
Interwebs
find
have it.
it. Mm-hmm.
Oh, can I shamelessly plug some more?
Yeah,
Okay,
keep
just
shamelessly
really
plugging.
quick. I am teaching my class again next week, live and virtual at the same time.
Which class?
Crazy. So that's enterprise attacker emulation and C2 implant development. One day I'm going to get my mouth around the title. No.
Oh,
I'm super
so wait,
excited.
that's interesting. Not a lot of conferences do that. It's usually either virtual or live. So you're going to teach it live, and then they're going to stream it for virtual attendees as well.
Yes.
Wow. That's
Velda's
ambitious.
Poor Velda's ready to kill us for doing that tour. So we're going to have an AV crew on site, and we are going to teach it live and virtual at the same time. So if you're interested in signing up, check it out. I've got that bit.ly/Joff's C2 class URL, and you can go check it out. So
Fantastic. May the AV gods be with you, my friend.
I hope so. It's like live demos. It's going to be interesting.
The workforce shortage in cybersecurity is a myth. As you can tell from the show notes, I had to go on a rant on this one. Michael Reutman is the author from Canna Security, and Michael's been on the show twice. And maybe maybe he'll hear this, and I'll get back to him.
He's so good on the show.
And I welcome Michael to come back on the show, sponsored or not, doesn't matter. You're welcome to come back on the show, and we can debate it live. Because this isn't like, I'm not knocking Michael here. I disagree, and we can agree to disagree, and that's totally fine too. Michael says that we don't have a workforce shortage problem. What we have is an automation in the wrong place problem. And it goes on to say that there are IT teams fix, according to surveys and studies, 10% of vulnerabilities, though some exceptional performers patch 25% on a monthly basis. If companies were to hire enough people to eliminate every vulnerability from their systems, they'd need at least to quadruple their workforce devoted to the task. Doesn't that also imply that we have a workforce shortage? If
it's a bit of a circular argument, right?
Because right. Now I'm also pulling out of context.
So you're saying
as
you
well.
don't have enough people to do the automation,
right? And again, I'm pulling out from context, right? And you could.
I mean, that goes to the CyCognito concept that we talked about, where we were saying that we've adopted such a complex network and we've scaled at such a large rate to SaaS applications, single sign-on, networks that are diverse, work from home, all of those things play into that. So I don't disagree with the fact that, we need more automation, but there's no way to scale that and still do what we're trying to do. CyCognito, like the whole premise of that was, in order to do this and do this well and make up time and be secure, we have to efficiently make those light speed jumps now. And I think that requires people and automation.
And skills.
But very smart automation.
I think we have a workforce shortage, but I also think we have a skills shortage and or gap as well, right? Because
you can't get decades in years, right? Like that's the problem. You know this very well. We've got a lot of people that are 10, 20 years into this. We can't make up 20 years. We can short circuit some of the stuff that we've learned and some of the, efficiently learn more things and learn how to learn better and provide more information. But we can't also short circuit 2 decades of skill building that, there was a small amount of us to start with. So
yeah, and I think in cybersecurity,
I've always been kind of on the fence with the whole like security as an entry level field type of thing. Like the way I always pitched it to when I was mentoring folks was, look, you go learn something else. And then that something else you learn, whether it's databases or development or whatever, there's a security layer on top of that, and you can step up into that. But I don't, this whole like SOC as an entry to security, I'm not sure how that works, because you're missing out on this whole foundational level of skills and knowledge, including working with the people in those departments that do that kind of stuff. Like if you go straight into a SOC, like you don't know how to build a rapport with a sysadmin or a DBA.
I think the workforce shortage is cybersecurity needing people in IT, development, policy, HR, legal, in all the other areas as well. It's not just technical, but it's also not just leadership. We need a fundamental structure that defines what roles we need to be created and curated, then a system to develop talent in those areas. And whether that talent's developed in the model that you describe, Adrian, or there are other models to not just
you look like
talent,
you're reading
skills.
Something, Paul.
Yes.
Is this your idea, Paul, or are you reading something?
I'm reading my own words, Jeff, from the show notes.
Yeah.
You can see it too.
I think what you're getting at, Paul. No, I want to make a comment.
Okay, well,
everyone just talk at once. All right, Jeff, then Joff. Jeff, then Joff.
My comment is, I think you're onto something, Paul, because I was going to characterize it more of it's not a labor shortage. It's more of a, it's not a security role shortage. It's a security awareness shortage.
Yes.
All those other job descriptions and areas that you described. I think everybody in the organization needs to understand the role that they play in security.
We need people that understand.
That they need to have a defined role.
Yes,
whatever
agreed.
that is.
I actually wrote, we need people that understand cybersecurity, and that doesn't mean that you're a technical wizard per se.
Yeah.
There was a Netscope blog, and I think we covered on the ESW a couple of weeks ago, that had like the same title to it, and I completely agree with the conclusion here, but disagree entirely with the way that Michael got there.
Yeah.
But the Netscope point was that we've got this kind of gatekeeping going on, with HR and things like the way that we're hiring people is flawed, and it's interesting if you talk to Andy Ellis, the ex-CISO of Akamai, and how he built out his team before he left there. Like he would look at the roles that he needed to hire for and say, okay, like who has the skill set, not who in security has the skill set. And he ended up hiring ex-teachers and ex-librarians. And, like when you look at some of these roles, it makes sense. It's like 5% of it is security knowledge with some of these roles. Like on the developer side, like, a lot of times an ex-developer makes a lot more sense than an experienced security person.
But what that implies is that we need the ability to teach people cybersecurity, whether you're just coming into the field or experienced. Joff, I want to go to you.
Yeah, can I make my comment? And I'm going to quote Mike Poore. Okay. I met Mike many, many years ago, and I love him to death. And one of his things when he was teaching all the time is he used to say, and of course, you got to put this in context. This is back in the early 2000s now. But he said, and I quote, "If you can replace yourself with a Perl script, you better find a new job quick." And, to that, and that's sort of paraphrasing, that's not a direct quote, but to that, I would say that we have a combination problem. And, the premise here getting to this conclusion was kind of ill-founded because we've got to, as an industry, always work smarter, not harder. I mean, if you do something as a cybersecurity professional 2 or 3 times manually, then you're not doing it right. Automate yourself and move it along to somebody else that can
automate yourself out of a job.
Script.
Yep, some of the best advice I ever got.
Yourself out of a job. I mean, in fact, I have literally lived a career like that, and I know many of us have, where I've just automated myself out of so many things.
Yep.
That I have passed appointments in my career where they had to replace me with like 7 people because they couldn't work it out, right? And I'm not joking. Okay, so my experience says we've got to work way, way smarter, and we need to recruit into those skill sets and basically apportion the talent into the right areas, not just grind people with manual tasks endlessly, because you cannot scale that. You just cannot scale that. And so that's the real essence of the problem. It's work smarter, not harder. Otherwise, we will never solve the problem. And some combination of automation and strategic planning and appropriate apportioning of resources to the right prioritization and the right problems is going to get us there.
Yeah, I also think, another aspect that Michael was talking about is the narrative that Ken has been talking about. And, look, I'm not saying this is a bad thing. Like, you should look at the vulnerabilities that you have that have CVEs and look at the ones that are actively being exploited. And you should probably fix those, right? But that's just like a small little data point in the larger picture, because as we established in the previous segment and in many shows, that attackers don't necessarily rely on just straight vulnerabilities. They rely on weaknesses in your people, processes, and technology. And that's what we have to get better at, really. If it comes down to it, when we look at a security program, it should just be part of the programs at your organization that include security in it. Security is not, I think what we end up with in a lot of the storylines that come out of security today is that security is just about patching your shit, and that's not the whole picture. That's but you should patch your shit. Like, that's important.
I would like to add one more comment to that, and this is directed to all of our listeners. If you are an information security professional, the best thing you can do for your career right now
is patch your shit.
Is to learn how to program stuff. To help your career. Get busy with some Python or some C# or some Golang.
I was going to bring that up, Joff, because I gave a talk back in 2015, and Paul's already heard me mention this once today on a call earlier today. But it was basically about the new security practitioner versus the old security practitioner. And I felt like we kind of had the split going on that was like mainframers versus, IT folks, Win Linux admin folks of the 2000s, where, a lot of security folks were pushing back a lot on having to learn to code. And I went out and I pulled from thousands of job requirements, just to look at what the new jobs were asking for, because this is when DevOps was really hitting, cloud was really hitting in 2015. And, almost all of them, you need at least scripting experience.
You got to.
like it's. Yeah. I agree with you. It's time to get over that.
But that doesn't apply to every role in cybersecurity.
Not every role, but we need more builders.
Paul's totally throwing a bomb by saying that because, frankly, it does. I call bullshit. If you want advancement, I mean, if you're fine being a SOC analyst for the rest of your life, and God bless you.
What about a CISO? Does a CISO know how to code, or does they just need people on staff that know how to code?
If a CISO knows how to code, he's going to understand the world around him a whole lot better.
So what is that? I guess what is that basic understanding that you need to work in cybersecurity? And does every role in cybersecurity need that level of understanding?
I don't think you should have an absolute for any role in cybersecurity. Like I mentioned before, like we need more librarians in cybersecurity. They don't need to know how to code. They need to know how to take data and do what librarians do and categorize it and organize it in interesting ways. So I'm not sure an absolute helps either. It's not everybody.
They need to know the concepts because software is everything. Software is the entire essence of our being today. And if you don't know the concepts, if you don't know what an algorithm is, if you don't know what, virtualization at the application level is and what it actually means from the software stack perspective, you're really not going to know how to do your job very well.
Right. But to translate it to healthcare, most that work in healthcare have a basic understanding of anatomy and diagnostic testing, right? That doesn't mean that everyone that works in healthcare
is what you're saying.
Can do a ultrasound guided procedure or operate, be in the operating room. But what I found with people in healthcare is they're super aware of a basic understanding of anatomy and a basic understanding of how medical procedures and diagnostic tests work, a lot more so than the general public. I'd challenge you to do a person on the street interview and ask people the difference between an MRI and an X-ray. And most people will surprise you.
So what we're saying is they
need
an architectural understanding, right?
Yes,
we're saying they need an understanding of what this software stack is. They don't need to know how to program it. Okay, I'll concede that point. But they need an architectural understanding of what the software stack is,
correct,
and what it means in the overall delivery of the IT product.
Yes,
and that's got to be there.
There's a baseline. Jeff,
just to
hold on,
Jeff,
devil's
advocate.
My turn. I think I would if it's possible for me to humbly submit an idea that I think those of us that are much more hardcore practitioners have a harder time taking that step backwards to looking at what really is the problem. I think we're all mostly in agreement that there is some sort of conceptual understanding that's required. I would say to Jeff, more of a technical architectural understanding if you're going to be having a hands-on IT technology software related role, which would fall under the umbrella of security or cybersecurity. But there's so many other roles and jobs and responsibility, as Paul's alluding to with his analogy of healthcare, that make up this whole thing that in an organization constitutes the business. And my other comment I want to make, just sort of overarching, is that I think the article, I agreed with the first premise and disagreed with his initial conclusion, and going back to the very beginning of the discussion of the article. I think we as humans operate on the assumption that security in a business context, in a professional context, wherever we work, whatever we do, it's either done already for us. I guess this would extend to us as consumers too. Security is taken care of for us. The things that we use are already secure, or somebody else is looking out for it and watching out for it. And I keep hearing variations of that in all of the comments and the discussion of this article, where if everybody understood their niche, their role, the impact of their actions and inactions in an overall security posture, I think organizations and we as a society would be better off. Paul, you mentioned people, process, and technology. I add to that basic fundamental premise that I've seen displayed as a three-legged stool. I add a fourth leg, and that's purpose. it's not good enough to do all these things if you don't know why you're doing it, which means for whatever organization or business you're in, it mostly has to do with data, but not all the time. What is it that's valuable? What are you trying to protect? Who do you need to protect it from, and for how long, and in what way? Who might, understanding the threats, who might want to go after it, and so on and so forth. To me, it's clear everybody in an organization has a role in cybersecurity, whether it's a declared cybersecurity position that they have, which is, I don't even know how to firmly declare what the delimiter is between, yes, you have a cybersecurity job in your organization, or you don't. Some are obvious, some aren't so obvious. I think there's a lot of gray area.
I think that's somewhat the future of the security role, is communicating those threats to the right people in the right way, because I think a lot of people show up to work and don't know what the threats are. Therefore, they're putting everyone in a position where we could be vulnerable, right? Whereas other jobs, they're hyper aware of the risk. Again, I'll go back to healthcare on this one. Most people that work in healthcare, we like to think that everyone that works in healthcare understands the risk of patient care, right? Because there's people's lives at stake. I think that's one of the analogies that when we put that as an overlay on cybersecurity, when people show up to work, they don't understand the threats and the vulnerabilities and the risk that they could pose, and what threats are out there. And to your point, Jeff, why people may want to attack. And I think that's a really good point, Jeff.
So let's make an analogy, and I know I'm running over Adrian, but let's keep going with the healthcare analogy, and let's talk about the understanding of what's involved in performing healthcare, everything involved with that. Let's apply this to the real world. In the world that we're living in today, where we're opening up post-COVID, we're coming out of things, a lot of people are vaccinated. What would people in the healthcare industry say to the lay citizen, the average citizen, of whether you should wear a mask or not, and under what circumstances? And I'm working on the hypothesis, and maybe I'm a little tad cynical and curmudgeonly, but when I go out in the public world these days, to the store or to a restaurant, which we're starting to do again, if I see someone in a mask, I assume that they've been vaccinated. If I see someone not wearing a mask, I assume that they haven't been vaccinated.
It's backwards, right?
You got
agree or disagree?
See, here in Tennessee, we simplify it. Just nobody's wearing masks at all. So you just
but I don't know. I could go back to Geoff's point. In the person that should be making the decision about mask or no mask, or whether there's a security control or not, should have that technical understanding.
Well, the point I'm trying to make,
I think the politicians,
it's a risk-based decision. You use it as an analogy, and what are the risks? What is the risk criteria? What is the evaluation that one should consider on whether you wear a mask or not? One criteria should be, have you been vaccinated or not? Maybe another criteria are the people that you're routinely exposed to within your family or within your bubble that you live in. Are any of them high risk or not?
And to back up Joff a bit here, his point is in a world that's been eaten by software, to use the, Andreessen quote, if you don't know how software works, you're kind of immediately at a disadvantage.
Yep. If you don't know how viruses work and spread, epidemiology, then maybe you shouldn't be the one making the decision whether or not people should wear masks.
You mean everybody just said that I'm right? Okay, I'll take it.
Yeah, we kind of all did just back up your point, Joff. That and I still agree. There are roles in cybersecurity where you're not a technical wizard, but that doesn't mean you don't rely on and work with people of various skill sets, all the way up to super ninja technical wizard, right, to help you make those decisions.
And to clarify, I was referring to the vast majority that are, underneath the management umbrella, the worker bees, right? And, those people that are in technical roles, which is going to be the vast majority, they need to understand the software stack.
I agree.
And even better, they need to have programming skills.
I agree.
Because
And not just security people, Joff. I think people in IT and other technical roles do need a deeper understanding of code in architecture.
Without a doubt.
Agreed.
So, serious question,
bees
though,
need a
Joff.
PR overhaul.
Serious question, Joff, because I in my day job PCI work, I am encountering more and more cloud environments and this, that, and the other in the cloud, which is all software based. Do you amend your statement in reference to cloud architectures and all the IaaSs and SaaSs and PaaSs and all that stuff that's now in the cloud? Is it still understanding the software stack, or do you have to understand how the cloud works too?
It's the same. It's the same thing. I double down on it.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, if anything, become intimately familiar with the APIs that are driving the cloud and learn how to hack them, which is programming, flat out.
Yep, flat out.
So what you're saying is one of these days I have to learn APIs. Gotcha.
Yeah.
I've been resisting it for quite a while.
Yeah, I think
APIs are easier than code.
Well, I mean, the
APIs are pretty
are
easy
code.
once you dig into them.
I mean, APIs are code, and you write code to interface with APIs. And I think a good exercise, Jeff, if you want to get an understanding of how they work, is to do some of that. And it doesn't matter to like which one you pick or what language you write it in, but once you've done that, to Joff's point, you will gain, I think, a better understanding of how to implement and protect something like the way applications talk to each other through APIs.
Right. I mean, and I've done it with AWS. I've done it with Azure. I haven't done it with Google Cloud, but those APIs, I mean, the entire cloud is software control.
Yeah.
And once you learn those APIs, you just drive it. Forget all the GUI crap. You just drive it from the APIs.
All right. Where do we want to go next? We need to talk about other stories this week.
You did have a lot of notes.
You mentioned crypto.
You had a lot of notes.
Yeah. So my story number 13, cryptography, is, and the title does not coincide with my research, Jeff. But the article states, cryptography whiz Phil Zimmerman looks back at 30 years of pretty good privacy. Now, a few thoughts on this. I'm reading Crypto by Steve Levy. Highly recommended. Mm-hmm. It's in the point of the story where Diffie and Hellman have done their thing, published their papers. We have the Diffie-Hellman algorithm.
Didn't they make mayonnaise?
No, different Hellman. Revest,
no relation.
Shamir, and Edelman have come up with the RSA algorithm, right? And Phil Zimmerman comes along, and he's like, hey, we need to protect ourselves from the government. I mean, I'm really distilling it down, right? But there was a lot of events that led up to that. He says, we need encryption technology so that people can communicate and have their communications be encrypted. And long story short, he comes up with PGP 1.0. Now, a few thoughts on this. Like, Phil was not a hardcore mathematician or cryptographer. That's something that you can glean very clearly from the story. And in fact, to back that up, his first implementation of PGP 1.0, the cipher that he created was horrible. Does anyone know the name of the cipher that he put in PGP 1.0? Pop quiz?
Nope. Not off.
You
the
mentioned
top
it
of my head.
earlier, so I'm not going to say.
Yeah. What is it? Joff, do you know?
No, I don't know.
Oh, he called it Bassomatic. And he wrote it from scratch, and he named it after a Saturday Night Live skit with Dan Aykroyd, where he was promoting the Bassomatic and putting fish in the blender, right?
Which is a classic.
Yep.
Somebody ought to find it on YouTube and put it in the Discord.
And put it in there. But it was horrible. And now, to Phil's credit, I mean, you recognize this. He got with actual crypto people in PGP 2.0. Does anyone know what the cipher was that was in PGP 2.0?
Salad shooter.
I want to say blowfish.
But that is a good explanation of what a cipher is.
And the only reason why I did that is because you kept looking up there, the shelf behind us, and I know there's a salad shooter.
It breaks up all the bits, so you can't put them back together, right? Yeah. That cipher.
So can I answer a question with a question, and that would be, what year did PGP 2.0 come out?
Oh, 1990?
No, it's 90.
Okay, I'm going with Des then.
It was IDEA. IDEA.
Okay.
IDEA.
That one I've heard of.
Yeah, which he got from, it was like a European researcher. So he got together actual crypto people. and kind of learn.
It was a good idea at the time.
But I think that Phil's real contribution was the dissemination of cryptographic technologies so that people can use them. And that got him, of course, in a lot of trouble. At the time, the government was, of course, trying to protect...
it's a weapon.
Yeah, it's a weapon. It shouldn't be exported. Remember, there's all export laws and things that. And
they still exist, Paul.
Do they? Because I don't
just
see
ignore them now.
Yes,
Yeah,
they
we
do.
just ignore them now, or like I don't see them as much. But there was something in
they still exist.
the
They
chipper
still
clip.
exist.
Chipper clip was being brought about, right? Chipper clip, clipper chip. What did I say? Chipper clip. Because we were talking about chipper. We were talking about like blending fish and salad shooters, which was an analogy to ciphers. The chipper clipper. No, the clipper chip was
And
being
Microsoft Clippy?
talked about.
Backdoor chip. Yes,
When was that? When was that being talked about, Jeff? Was it like late 90s?
Early 90s.
Early 90s.
It was about 96, I think.
Yep, 96. Because I remember doing my first public speaking class in college in about 95, and I talked about the Clipper chip.
Right.
It was while I was there, and I left in 96.
Gotcha.
So
And so
95,
this article
96.
says that 2001 was kind of the year where the government kind of in the U.S. Relinquished kind of the whole crypto thing.
Well, he mentioned NSA and Robert, having a discussion with Robert Morris Sr., my former colleague at NSA. I think
Were you there at the same time as Morris Sr.?
Yeah, I was.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think I took a course from him one time, and just he was the prototypical. Think of all the Hidden Figures movie. The '60s.
Right.
Engineers are always in suits and ties, and that's what you wear to work every day, type of thing. I got to meet Phil a couple years ago and share with him my little PGP story, which was I was on the InfoSec side of the house. And there was an edict that went out because, back in those days, NSA was sort of the one-stop shop for crypto for all of the Defense Department and anything classified in terms of the government. So they had no competition. They just would design it and create it and sell it to you or give it to you in some cases. But you as the customer were paying for it one way or another. And we were approached by one of the armed forces branches. I don't recall which one it was. Not that it matters. And they said, "Hey, well, what about PGP? That seems to be pretty good. Why can't we use that to secure whatever our email or whatever, rather than the multi-million-dollar, multi-year contract that you're making us go through?" So this edict went out. Literally, everybody drop what you're doing within what was C4 and probably all of InfoSec, anybody that could do this, find an attack on PGP, break PGP. And there's always been rumors for years and years about whether NSA could break PGP or not. So I am not about to reveal any deep, dark secrets, and nor am I going to confirm nor deny whether PGP was actually broken. But there was a group of guys that came up with an attack against PGP. And PGP is public key cryptography, so there's a private and a public key, and you keep that in PGP on what PGP called a key ring, which is just a file in a folder that's your keyring folder. So these guys, they came up with an attack against PGP, and they were praised and lauded and paraded around. They went down to D.C. and the Pentagon, and they were praised as heroes for saving the day, saving the
government can snoop on our
prolonging
communications.
NSA's ultimate demise anyway, because they weren't going to compete in a much more digital world. But they got huge cash awards and all sorts of accolades. And some weeks or months later, they were doing a lunch and learn for us peons, their coworkers, in the C4 lab. We which was a larger room where they could set up like a slide projector and project a presentation. So they're going through their attack, and I can tell you what the attack is. They found in whatever the prevailing word processing package was at the time. It was WordStar or something like that.
WordPerfect?
I think it was predecessor to WordPerfect, but something along those lines. They found some unused byte space in a document, and they wrote some code and embedded it in a document that would essentially, if somebody opened the document, it would execute the code and copy the key rings to a file and exfiltrate it out on a future email. Sound familiar?
And see, now the NSA doesn't have to do any of that cryptography breaking. They just create a secure messaging platform called Anom.
There you go.
Yes, they do.
Great segue.
Actually,
I'm almost done. Before you can segue, I mean, my little punchline. I listened to them give this presentation on how they came up with this attack against PGP, and they got to the point where they're asking questions. I raised my hand and I said, "Wouldn't this attack work against our crypto as well?" And they stopped and thought for a minute, and they're like, "Yeah, it would," because all I was doing was stealing the keys.
Right.
And I said, "Well, then what's the big deal?" And they're like, "Well, we were tasked to find the attack against PGP, and that's what we did." I'm like, "Well, you guys were bogus, because PGP was not attacked. In this instance, it was the key implementation and key distribution."
Right.
Segue away.
so
Larry.
Anom.
Lee.
Oh, I did. See, I didn't even have a story on that, but if Lee, you got one, then let's go
my
for
number
it.
one.
Awesome.
Yeah. There was the FBI distributed this messaging app on phones that had pretty much everything else disabled but this. They were sold through the black market. Of course, they weren't attributed to the FBI. I think the FBI backdoored the app. The app actually came from some guy who turned, in exchange for providing them access to that, got off on some minor crime. And then so they started in 2018, I believe it was, distributing these phones. They had over 9,000 users, 25 million messages they went through. And what did they do?
They got the key. They got the key for the Bitcoin wallet that they paid back the Colonial Pipeline.
That's a different story.
Is it?
Yes,
Is it?
Yeah. So the NOM, they just busted they wrote 500-600 warrants and got hundreds of arrests around the globe. 4,000 cops in Australia alone.
It says
And I just
800
thought
people
amazing.
they arrested.
This is social engineering by the law enforcement that worked.
So, Lee, my understanding of the whole Anom thing is a little bit different in that there was no hacking involved for any of the government agencies to monitor these communications.
It was a mole.
No. Well, yeah, they created the app, and if you read the EULA, it said these communications are monitored by the government.
Even better.
More
But everybody knows nobody reads it.
No one
it
reads the
doesn't matter
EULA.
what the EULA says.
No, they
Best place to hide it.
Exactly.
and the criminals were saying this thing is cool. Go buy one.
Yeah.
Do you know how many private keys are in EULAs?
So
All
many.
of them?
Damn it.
So many.
If only we'd read them.
Yep.
Is this like
read
a
'em, right?
bad joke at a geek party?
Yeah.
How many private keys are in EULAs? Ready?
So that was we were having that conversation at work today, and Mike Poor was chiming in, back to adding some Mike to a previous segue.
Mike comes up twice tonight.
Mike comes up a lot on the shows. We need to get him on the show again.
Yeah, he was talking about that there was something about a EULA that he had remembered because he collected weird documents like that for a long time. That the EULA said, basically somewhere in that, hey, my name is so and so, and if you read this EULA and you read this part, email me, and if you're the first, I'll send you $100.
So Mike emailed him.
No, Mike didn't email him, but this was after it came out. But it was 7 years before someone ever emailed him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Now, for an entire day, everyone's going to read half of the EULAs that they're presented with.
And that
You're going
reminds
to read the
me,
first 7
productivity
pages, the
just
second
dropped.
7 pages.
it's not worth it for $100 to read every EULA that you have in your possession. I'm just saying.
True.
Yep.
But it reminds me of an exercise that I took in grade school. It was probably junior high. what you guys call middle school, where we were given this quiz, and the very top of the page it says, "Read the entire set of questions first before you do anything." And then there was like 20 things where it was like, stand up at the beside of your desk and pat your head, and spin your, all sorts of weird physical activities that you're supposed to do. And there's like 19 of them. The 20th question or statement was, once you have read this whole document, sign it and turn it in. So if you followed the instructions,
you signed it and turned it in.
Read the whole thing, sign it, and turn it in. But the whole class is, dancing around, climbing on their chairs, doing whatever. Everybody fell for it, myself included.
Yep.
So if you're going to read it carefully, but don't bother reading a EULA.
Yep. That reminds me very much of a programming final I had in college. I forget which language it was.
Go to the store. If they have milk, get milk. Go to the store, get milk, and if they have eggs, get 5. And you come home with 5 gallons of milk.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. No. But as we went through the semester, he had us create, a program that did A, and then we had a program that did B, and then a program that did C. And but at the final, it was create a program that takes the output of A and passes it to B, and then takes the output of B and passes it to C, and give me the output of C, and show me the code. And the first thing he said in class, that in the class, in like the first week of class, was that all good programmers reuse code.
Mm-hmm.
And we all brought our floppy disks with the code of A, B, and C in it, and it was basically copy paste, assigned variable to variable, copy paste, assigned variable to variable, copy paste, turn in program. And I was done in about 10 minutes.
And everyone else rewrote.
And he's looking at me like, what the hell? I'm like, he says, did you cheat? I said, no. I used the lessons that you taught me.
Oh, very wise.
Very wise. Yeah. And I'm like, here I am getting nervous because he thought I cheated.
Right.
And he's like, well, how'd you do it? And I'm like, give me a grade first. And he looks at it. He says, all right, have a seat. And he goes and looks at it. And it was about 15 minutes. He's like, great job. He said, how'd you do it? I said, you said in the first week of class, look right here in my notes. You said all good programmers reuse code.
Mm-hmm.
And you made us do A, B, and C. And I just copied and pasted A, B, and C. He's like,
that's awesome.
Wow. All right. You get an A. First time I got an A in programming classes.
First and last?
Yeah, first and last. Yeah.
So,
Lee,
how about my number 5 and your was it 17? The recovery of the Colonial Pipeline bitcoins. 63.7 out of 75 bitcoins were recovered. The rest of the bitcoins were actually dark matter, whatever. That was their commission for using their infrastructure. The rest is what they got, and they apparently stored their private key online. What do you think, Jeff?
Was that the ultimate recovery?
I think it was. I mean, the way I heard it reported was it would have been more, but whatever the value of Bitcoin has gone down between the time that they paid the ransom and when they recovered it significantly. So they basically recovered all of the Bitcoin. It's just not worth as much as when they paid it.
My understanding was that they didn't recover all of the Bitcoin because they had already used some and spent some of it. But I could be wrong.
Well, the majority of it.
But still, it was not nearly worth as much, right, Tyler?
All they're going to get.
Right, Tyler?
Yeah. The story I heard is it was from the affiliate.
No, I'm sorry, Tyler.
Every show.
Until he finds the drive.
Every show.
Until he finds the drive. Sad face. Sad face.
When he finds the drive, you can read the headline, Tyler Robinson, now proud owner of the Cyber Risk Alliance.
Six Teslas.
I was hoping it was a more one interesting story than that. I was hoping the U.S. we hacked into some hacker system and recovered the Bitcoin and took the fight to the attackers, or even if we uncovered a mole and they leaked the key, or
maybe in the docudrama, that'll be the story.
Something.
So the anecdotal PGP story that I told in this story just reminds everyone that the cryptography is very, very rarely what is attacked. It's almost always the key is compromised.
Management, right?
Yep.
Yeah, we're at the point in the story now of DigiCash, actually. And now I can't remember his name, but there was someone in, I want to say 1995, that came up with the concept of digital currency that would use cryptography. And the first occurrence of that I can date it back to is the founder of DigiCash in 1995. The first application, which never made it to production, was you can anonymously pay for tolls from your car. Like EasyPass says who you are. This system did not, kept your payment anonymous. It was the first occurrence that I could recall in study of the digital cash that uses cryptography. Craziness, right? Now listening to that now is kind of weird, because I'm like, all the cryptocurrencies we have today, it's exploded.
Yeah, you want to little divergent segue onto something like that type of history. Imagine you are reading "Return from the Stars" by Stanislaw Lem.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, imagine you found a hard drive and it had Ron Paul cash.
No, that was me today. Ron Paul coin. Yep,
Ron Paul coin,
worth nothing. Not even worth the bits it's printed on. All right. So imagine you're reading "Return from the Stars" by Stanislaw Lem on your Kindle, and you turn to the page that says the books were crystals with recorded contents. They could be read with the aid of an option, with an opton, which was similar to a book, but only had one page between the covers. At a touch, successive pages on the text appeared on it.
Creepy.
Yeah, that book was written in 1961.
Wow. Wow.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
We got lots of other fun stories in here. What other ones I wanted to cover? Oh,
at least the ones you mentioned in the intro, right?
No, we don't cover those, Adrian. You got to get in the swing of Paul's Security Weekly. We don't cover any stories that we say in the monologue.
TikTok.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. How about TikTok?
It's not doesn't pose a threat.
I mean, we come back to we said this from the beginning. We were going to have that lull where everybody banned TikTok. Everybody was done with TikTok. It's a big security risk. 3 months later, it's out of the news. No one cares. Everybody has TikTok installed, and now it's even more popular. And now they're collecting biometric data, including face and voice prints.
I saw that.
I think what we came to was that TikTok collects a lot of data. Maybe more so than most apps, but not all apps. And therefore, I guess what we came down to is it's up to the user to make the decision as to what information you share.
Yeah, what's your security risk posture, right? Does that matter to you? And then, again, we go back to, okay, so who cares? If it doesn't matter to you, does it matter to your wife or your grandma? The data that you choose not to share is probably fairly limited in comparison to the people that share a network with you, and therefore your data can be accessed anyway. So
if it can live in the Apple App Store, it can't be as horrible as we need to ban it as a country. At least my opinion. Again, you leave it to the users to make that assumption. Apple protects its App Store better than anyone else's App Store. And so if it's abiding by their policies, it's likely not... I think I'll go so far as to say it's not bad enough to ban from an entire country. However, you should do some due diligence as a user to scrutinize the applications that are on your devices and your family members' devices.
It's nothing new, right? This just goes back to that forward thinking. This is a 100 or 1,000-year war by China. We are not thinking long-term enough with the ramifications that apply directly to us now. There's not a big risk to us. There's not a huge privacy risk, even to me personally. My risk threat profile's, fairly limited in that capacity. Take that and think about your biometric security and the things that cannot be replaced. Fingerprints, voice prints, genetics that you're sharing. All of those things are tied to you directly, and that is tied to you, your grandkids, and future generations. Those are things that are going to be profiled and utilized for things that we're not comprehending or thinking about from a security or privacy standpoint long term. Like whether insurance companies use it now to profile cancer patients and your likelihood of dying and your ability for your kids or grandkids to get a life insurance policy when they're old, that's an entirely different thing that we're not considering. So I don't think it is a big issue. It probably is just fine on the Play Store. It's probably just fine on your phone, and it's not causing a huge risk now. But what data is being collected and how that's going to be used in the future is something that no one is kind of talking about or thinking about.
Right. And I don't think it's going to be an event that we need to respond to or feel compelled to respond to, I should say, is what you're saying, Tyler, that the imminent threat is a long-term game and a long-term threat that, like, you're not going to wake up one day and go, oh, shit, I'm screwed because I had TikTok installed. It's going to be like this slowly kind of chipping away at that until some people notice, maybe not kind of thing.
Well, it's like the phone book, right? Like everybody's name and phone number was in a phone book how long ago? Now you just pull up a search engine and you can get a lot of information. There may be private people out there that don't realize, like, they can figure out what relatives you have, where you live, what your date of birth is, your general age, even look up criminal records, all with a click of a button. So as we progress, the amount of that data that is publicly facing or searchable or usable by, maybe even an employer by your grandkids, those are things that, 50 years ago, a phone book wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
And as we move forward, these are kind of things that we've slowly acclimated to because the technology has adopted and progressed into that manner.
The model's backwards now. I was explaining this to my wife because when we had the phone book, you could pay to be unlisted. You had to actually pay the phone company. Is that what you paid the phone company? Right?
I remember that.
It was
right?
the phone company.
You had to pay.
opt out.
You had to opt out and you had to pay. But now,
Right.
My wife finds the Dunkin' Donuts app and she's like, babe, this is great. Like, I get free coffee. I'm like, it's not really free. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you're trading your information for free coffee. I'm like, that's what you're doing, is you're trading your privacy for free coffee. Because I guarantee you the Dunkin' Donuts isn't just like happy to give away free coffee. Whatever information that app is collecting, they're selling, and that's how they're paying for your air quotes free coffee. I don't think I was compelling enough to suggest, because she was like, free coffee is free coffee, and I don't care, right? Yeah. And I think that's the problem we have today, is making people care enough about privacy.
I think your wife, all she heard was
free
blah,
coffee.
blah, 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 blah,
free
blah,
coffee.
blah. Free coffee.
I think a better understanding of free that doesn't align with like monetary, spending monetary, value for something, and I was having this conversation on Twitter the other day, was like a free webinar. Like most people understand, like, their time has value to them. So, if you're asking to take an hour of their time, sure, you're not paying anything for sitting in front of that webinar, but it sure don't feel free if you're not enjoying it. Time is valuable.
Well, I think people understand that when you register for something, you control on the keyboard what information you're sharing with that. And it also should be conveyed, as we do with our webinars, like what information is shared, right? Because the phone number's always been a big issue for me and with webinars, right? Both as a consumer and a producer of webinars. I'm like, the phone number is optional, guys. Like, you can't require a phone number, and if people don't want to enter a phone number, like, the big point there is, like, you're probably not going to get your next enterprise security software sale because someone put a phone number in for a webcast. Like, that's just not how this stuff works. It really isn't. But there needs to be a transparent give and take, right? Like, if you give me this information, this is how I will share it. This is the benefit I'm going to give you for giving me that information, and here's how I'm going to handle and treat your information. As long as it's transparent, it's fine. I think the issue that I have with things like the Dunkin' Donuts app is maybe it's in the EULA, right? Somewhere along the lines, they're probably saying in the EULA, like, we're sharing and we're selling your information, and you're skipping by that, or they're just not disclosing it. And that's the issue that I have with privacy is, if you want to give me free coffee, that's great. I know it's not free. Tell me what my cost is. Like, what information am I sharing and with whom? And if I'm willing to make that trade, that's fine, but it should be my decision. Joff is smiling.
I can't remember what I'm smiling about now.
You're just happy.
I'm just a happy guy. You know what? I'm happy that I'm going to be traveling soon. Isn't that weird? I didn't used to be happy about that.
I know. You're happy to get on an airplane.
I'm actually jealous that you're happy about that because I'm not traveling. Like it's going to be at least another couple of months for me.
Yeah, we are traveling in October to InfoSec World, and it's relevant to TikTok because I believe we've got the CISO for TikTok. Is that one of the? Is that public? I hope that's public.
It is now.
It is now.
Okay. There it is.
No,
you heard it here first, folks.
No, I did see it. I did see it on a website on the website for InfoSec World.
Yeah, it was just on the internal Teams SharePoint website, but that's okay.
Shit. Well, anyway, said it now. The TikTok, I believe the CISO for TikTok in the U.S. is one of the keynotes for InfoSec World.
Yeah, he's 2 talks before me that second day.
Yeah. Okay. So I didn't screw the pooch on that one. That is public. Okay. Good. Speaking of privacy and information,
and speaking of conferences and all that, don't forget Unlocked.
And then Unlocked.
Yep.
After that is the next time we'll be able to travel. More details forthcoming. That's not until December, so we've got a lot of time to slowly leak out details of that.
I am going to be in Florida way too much in December.
I know. Well, it's one of the, quite frankly, it's one of the states that's more open to travel.
Yep.
So,
well, here's the other thing. I mean, if you're going to be there, being there in December or January is much more comfortable than being most other places in the country at that time of year. So
very true.
Why not?
Why not?
So we did we did something different. It's just us for the family. So it's my wife and 2 kids now for local family, and not sort of realizing that we were going to be in Florida for Unlocked. We went and booked our Disney vacation for the year. And we arrive at Disney on December 23rd, and we come home January 2nd.
There you go.
So we're doing Christmas and New Year's at Disney.
Love it.
It's going to be fun.
Way to win.
Yep.
Yeah, the only time we've been to Disney was in early January, before school started, and it was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was great.
Going to warm places when it's cold in the rest of the world is definitely a thing.
But crowds were gone. It was empty. Like we got into everything right away.
Yep.
I highly recommend, on that note, a trip to like Key West in January or February. I've done that. It is a fantastic idea.
Something we said for going to places where other people are not traveling to, right, and avoiding the crowds. I found an interesting article. I got 99 problems, but my knack ain't one.
You got 99 problems, and your knack ain't one of mine either.
Right?
Usually,
because nobody uses them, right?
Right.
I was trying to understand the technology behind this and using a transparent bridge as one way to bypass a knack. I think what they were getting at is if I have a transparent bridge, I have
Can
to
I
be.
help you, Paul?
Do I have to? Yeah, Joff. Do I have to be plugged physically in between the system, and then I can communicate using its? That was one thing he didn't say is where in the chain I have to be plugged in, because I understood
I don't
it
think
as
you have to be.
I got to be plugged in between the computer and the network, and then as a transparent bridge, I can transmit and receive traffic from that MAC address. Right?
Yeah. No. So remember, a bridge is just a 2-port switch.
Right. Yes. Well, that was his other thing.
Or is it a 2-port hub?
A 2-port hub.
No, it's really just a
Or a
2-port,
VM with 2
2-port
NICs.
switch.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's really just a 2-port switch. But the key here is that the MAC address that you present to the NAC solution has to be the same MAC address that the NAC solution will accept as a port open event, which is going to be a MAC address that is whitelisted by the solution.
Someone's already authenticated to the NAC. Their MAC address is whitelisted.
Right. So the NAC's downfall is that traditionally it is dependent on 802.1x being on the client side, but not all devices have 802.1x on the client side. And so for things like printers and multifunction devices, they've had to make exceptions, and the exception is authenticate the Ethernet address, authenticate the MAC address. So what you need to do is spoof that MAC address in whatever device you're in, plug into that same port, and you're off and running. So transparent bridge, well, that really is just a way of, plugging in a two-port switch, or you can even have a multi-port switch. It doesn't make any difference. But the key is presenting the right MAC address for communication to the actual switch port upstream so the NAC solution accepts it.
Right. I got you.
And that's really where it's at. Actually, it's funny you say this, because one of the most fun times that I had on a red team was when I actually built an interception box that was a transparent bridge and had a cellular modem in it, and I put it in between the so it's not just about .1x or not .1x. I put it in between the .1x client and the switch.
Yep.
The .1x client still authenticated, but it was coming through my transparent bridge.
That's what he was describing. Yes.
This is the other thing that they're describing. But the fact that I had a transparent bridge there bridging that traffic through means I can look at all that traffic. And in fact, I can even play games with some of that traffic. And the cellular modem allowed me to have a reverse SSH tunnel out to a system that I controlled, so I could get into that bridge at any time and do whatever I wanted.
Now, he was running like responder on that transparent bridge. That means I can transmit traffic on that MAC address, not just observe the traffic.
Well, you have to be very, very careful, though, because when you run a solution like responder on that transparent bridge, you cannot talk back to the network, but you can talk back to the client side, right? So you can play games back on that client side as much as you want. But the minute you transmit something back to the network that is not the same MAC address as the MAC that's passing through the bridge, you're probably going to get cut off because they'll have port security on the device.
More than one MAC address shows up on the same port.
And they'll nip it at that point. But yes, I've totally played that game and hacked the living fuck out of a place. And that's an appropriate expression. This is not a PG show.
That is a technical term.
It is a technical term.
So,
actually, Cisco networking related stuff. Cisco Smart Install Protocol is still abused in attacks 5 years after first warning.
Oh my God, it is.
Yeah, I saw that and I was like, what year is it?
But what's interesting was, this is like a downfall of a security in a protocol, right? Because they're trying to make it easy to configure stuff, but in doing that, introduced like an insecure protocol. It's kind of like WPS, Larry, right? Where it tries to make it easy for the end user to configure a secure wireless network.
Yeah, you should have a 63-character hex password. Oh, I can't do that, so we'll do pre-shared key instead, and it has to be 8 characters. But even that's too hard, so we'll just do 4 digits. Actually, no, we'll do 4 digit. Well, sorry, we'll do 8 digits, but we'll split that up into 2 4-digit pairs, and the last byte of the second 4-digit pair is a checksum, and we'll tell you which half you got wrong. Like, what could go wrong?
What that's like?
That's WPS right there.
What's the difference?
It's like you took Landman and kicked it in the balls and broke it in half,
and made it numbers and put it in the air.
Yeah,
exactly.
Jeff, you had a
question. Yeah, what's the difference between making these things easy to configure and use and automation, as we discussed earlier?
Yeah, it's a combination of both, Jeff. It's using automation to make things easier, right? I think what Cisco Smart Protocol was trying to accomplish was just that, Jeff, was automating it to make it easy to configure a bunch of switches. But in doing that, they made it horribly insecure. But my comment was like, I don't know if you guys have seen it. I've never seen smart installs being used in enterprise. It's always just like a feature that's there that people hack. Like the only thing it made it easy to do is to hack the switches.
Yeah,
I think calling it smart, I think kind of started to dig that hole for them.
Yeah.
Like
yeah. You know what my favorite feature, though, of any switch, I'm not even just going to pick on Cisco, any switch out there, my very favorite feature is that you can tell the switch to TFTP its configuration back to you. Now, what could possibly go wrong, right?
Well,
and there's been multiple exploits on this, right? Where you could actually, even in the case of Crisco, you can actually send it a single packet and it will just send its config back to you. It's like,
is
awesome.
that using SNMP?
No.
Do that,
you know why they did that?
Better job.
You could have Cisco Works archive all of your configurations over TFTP. What could be easier?
Right.
But
Totally, by the way, on a different tag, totally found like entire like SMB shares with Cisco configs on them that has broke people's network right open, right? Because you just run those things and crack them. And
well, I think it's similar, Jeff, to cryptography being broken because you just pour, you find access to the keys. Finding access to the Cisco configs is like having access to the keys to the network, because we all know a lot of those password hashes that are in those are very easily crackable.
Or I was just going to say, or it's like cracking passwords because you're not really cracking a password. You're guessing the right password.
Yeah, correct. Tomato.
Whatever.
Yep. How do you prevent ransomware? But actually,
turn off the firewall.
Actually, this was a pretty good article, I have to say. Like a few times this week, I looked at the titles.
This Adams?
No, I do want to talk about. We should segue into Adams. This was actually an eWeek article with a title of how you can prevent ransomware, and I was like, this is not going to be good. Like, this is just going to be a distillation of all the advice that we've given people for the past 20 years, but. The author collected comments from many CTOs, CIOs, and CISOs, and I thought got some pretty good answers that were not just you need to have good backups and you need to apply patches to your stuff and blah, 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 blah. It was like, you need to have good security operations, a good security policy, and good security engineering and testing. I'm like, yeah, that's what we've been saying. Like, if I had to distill it down into 3 points, like, that's actually pretty good advice, right? I mean, it's not easy to do, of course, but that's really what it comes down to. Tyler, when you described organizations that are hard to break into and do pen tests for, right? It's because they had good security operations, they had good security policies, and good engineering and testing, right? I mean, that's essentially what you were describing, and in addition to teamwork, right? Those are the basic building blocks.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that, this is from a high level and like a C or executive level. This is fundamentally a good roadmap and things you definitely should do. The problem becomes but how?
Yeah.
How do you actually achieve?
But I'm glad the advice wasn't but I'm glad the advice wasn't very prescriptive and you need a firewall and you need intrusion detection
you need a blinky light box
you
that
need
does
endpoint protection and XDR and next generation antivirus firewall.
I mean, but they're not wrong if they were to say those things.
No, you could just have a GPO that turned on, workstation to workstation SMB blocking, allow all below that, and we're going to cover probably 60% of that low-hanging fruit just with that. So there's that.
Yep. They also talked about knowing your data, having data backups, involving your employees. I liked that it was high level. Actually, their number one point was better management.
Yeah,
I think we had to sum it up you just got ransomware. Like, what we should do? You should have better management. And you can even interpret that in different ways, and it's still applicable. Like, better management of your security program, better management of your technologies, better management of your data. It kind of all comes down to better management.
Well, I mean, if you look if you get into the details of how ransomware is being used today, especially in a lot of these extortion cases, where they're hitting the whole organization, it's not just opportunistic ransomware where somebody clicks through a bad link and boom, they get the ransomware screen. Where they're hitting a whole organization at once, deploying the ransomware to encrypt files is like step 17. So when you're looking at it in that context, those first 16 steps, better backups is not going to be your first go-to. It's going to be how do these first 16 things happen, first of all?
Yep.
Yeah. Speaking of, what about the Adam Shostak article?
I didn't read the Adam Shostak article. You were telling me about it before the show, though.
Yeah, I mean, I got a quick chance to skim it, and sounds like
ransomware is not the problem.
Adrian read it too.
Yep.
Adam's article was ransomware is not the problem, and this was back to the same things that we were talking about last week. It's not it. The ransomware is not the thing. It's all of those basics that we could be doing that we're not, principle of least privilege and network segmentation, and talking about dot clicking shit and all of those types of things that we were talking about last week.
I mean, those 16 things I mentioned. I mean, that's what this is getting into again. It's saying, look, step
I prefer
3,
12.
A 12-step program?
The 12-step PCI program.
I mean, some of it is in there. I mean, in most of these ransomware cases, Mimikatz is being used to dump credentials, and then then they use those credentials, to download the actual ransomware or use TrickBot to, put it on other systems. And like you read those in between steps, and it's like, it's the same crap that's been done for the last 10 years, and you're not noticing it.
Yeah. One of the things I love about Adam's article is he mentioned the book that I think I was trying to reference last week, and that is Building Secure and Reliable Systems by Heather Atkins, Betsy Bayer, Paul Blankenship, and Piotr Lewandowski, and 2 more authors. Heather's the lead author on that, and we interviewed her on Enterprise Security Weekly, episode 187. And it was one of the more notable interviews for me, and I think to be called out in Adam's article is totally appropriate, because I think it's around what we're saying, right? If you want to be more secure, you got to build more secure and reliable systems. And I think it's one of the works that is the application and operationalization of DevOps theory, in that there are unilateral teams that are highly focused on accomplishing a mission, but include all of the functions and work closely together on things like being fast, being accurate in the requirements you want to meet, being secure, all in one team producing that one product. And I think that that's really where the concept of site reliability engineers comes into play. For me, and really helped me understand that was my interview with Heather.
Nice.
And I think that's really where we need to get to in terms of just the resiliency and building those.
Well,
secure and reliable implies also resiliency too.
And once you're comfortable with that, then you can move on to chaos engineering, which is just
agreed.
Let's do some crazy shit and see if you survive it.
But I think that if philosophy is the right word, or approach, fits into what I was saying earlier. It's that expectation, the paradigm that the things that we use should already be secure.
Agreed.
And I agree with that philosophically. Where it breaks down in the real world is the lack of the appropriate motivation for organizations to actually follow through on all that. All these companies and organizations that are getting hit with ransomware, and the sky is falling literally for a lot of them. They've gotten away up until now with not doing all the things, and they were fine. And their risk assessment said, "Oh, this kind of stuff won't happen to us," or we're willing to take the chance. And while we intuitively think that's a bad approach, pragmatically, because we've had how many conversations about the cost and the incentives and who's going to pay for it, and how's the prioritization going to happen in the organization. You can sort of understand why they would take that risk, and hopefully, if nothing else, and I can't believe I'm saying this, they've got the cyber insurance to cover the worst case scenario when it does happen. That's a pragmatic risk approach for most organizations that can't afford and don't have the infrastructure, the expertise, the training, or even the awareness that they need to do all this stuff that we say is essential to build secure systems and have a secure organization.
I think the mindset we're missing is a sports mindset. And I'm like the least sports-oriented person. Like, I didn't play a ton of sports growing up or anything like that. But the thing that keeps hitting me is the only way to get good at this is to practice. And if you're not practicing the kind of stuff that happen in these situations, if you're not using your pen tests, and other opportunities to practice, to see how good you are and to see if you'd fail or not, if you're only doing the one IR test a year that PCI requires, like, how good is a sports team going to be if they practice once a year? Not very good.
I agree with that, but the annual pen test, I have never seen a pen test in all the companies that I've worked with in PCI. I've never seen a pen test report that was actually a pen test, where they were actually testing the defenses and seeing how well they performed. It was either a glorified vulnerability scan, or it was at best company I'm working with right now, they have a vulnerability assessment
and
report,
it's a missed opportunity,
which is really what it is. That's absolutely a missed opportunity.
And here, I thought you were going to say, Jeff, that I've never seen a pen test report at a PCI company where they actually tested the pens. But
rarely. No,
also
rarely is it even a test. Yeah. It's not a test. It's a
they just verify that there are pens. They don't actually test them.
No.
Well, now wait a minute. Don't forget Rita's test of the pen. Rita Strand, John's mom.
The pen is for signing the AOC.
Oh, of course.
Jeff,
touche, mister.
There's that. Well, there's a lot of missed opportunity with how PCI is done, and it's getting worse and worse as I keep getting back into it now. But I still say everything that you need to protect yourself against ransomware, anything you can come up with. I defy any of the co-hosts or any of our listeners to come up with something that is a protection against ransomware that isn't already in the PCI data security standard, or the risk cybersecurity framework, or the CIS top 20 controls. I mean, it's all the stuff that we know should be done. It's all the basic fundamental stuff. And, we can tell people again and again they need to do it, or we can keep exploring the reasons why they're not doing it.
I think there might be one. And that's something that's been in my head, and it's not based on scientific research. It's the It's the diversity of solutions. It's that you don't just pick up Amazon. You pick up Amazon Azure and Google Cloud. You pick it. It's like you've got this whole menu of very similar platforms, and you don't secure them all. You don't apply the solutions across the board, and you got so much diversity you can't be smart on all of them.
Well, I think it even goes a little deeper than that, Lee. I think I agree with that assessment, but I also think it's so many organizations are really just pushing the easy button when it comes to implementing technology. And they're like, hey, I can go grab this, I can go get this, I can go deploy Windows systems across my environment, I can set it up, it's easy, and I don't have to put any more effort into it. Again, I'm pushing the easy button.
How much is
I got a Windows
how much
domain.
of that is them pushing the easy button, and how much of that is them not being given enough resources or support from?
Well, I was going to say it's not the easy button; it's the cheap button.
Yep.
Yeah.
But because I agree with Jeff's point in total. There's a lot of really good standards out there to cover this if you follow them. But if you've got too much going on, you're screwed. And
because you don't want to spend. To Adrian's point, you don't want to spend the money to do it correctly. You can spend less money.
That was Jeff's point.
Well, you can spend less money. I don't know whose point it was, sorry. But you can spend less money and get it done, right? Yeah. And it's operational and everyone's working, and that's great. But the penalty that you're going to pay, perhaps at some point, is you might get ransomware, or you might get hacked in some other way. I mean, today it's ransomware. Tomorrow it could be something different.
And my point is that PCI is one of the few regulatory standards out there that is mandatory and has had teeth over time to properly incentivize organizations to follow it. Now, organizations more and more are figuring out how to do the bare minimum or dodge it, or not not take advantage of the fact of, they've cleaned up all the card data in their environment, which is what PCI is focused on, but they don't apply the very same principles to anything else that's sensitive or critical within their environment, because nobody's telling them, hey, this is a good framework. You should be doing this everywhere.
I don't disagree. I think, PCI is the data security standard, but for payment card data, right? But I agree, Jeff. You could apply that to the other aspects of the organization, and I think it does cover many of the operational risks to your data in your organization as well.
I'm open to be proven wrong, and I often ask the question, back in the former times when I would get into arguments about the efficacy of PCI, to those that say, well, it's just the bare minimum. It doesn't begin to do what you really have to do for security. I'm like, give me an example. Tell me something that you should be doing as a basic fundamental security practice that isn't in some way, shape, or form in the PCI data security standard. It's the reason I did the MITRE ATT&CK framework mapping, because I suspected that all the mitigations that the framework ultimately points to in order to prevent or detect all the attacks that are tracked, are already in the PCI data security standard. And, it wasn't 100%. There was a few things that, they're not really there because, newer technologies or just the nuance of what the attack framework was looking for in terms of mitigation. But it was like 93, 94%. It was there.
Well, and again, I think the piece that's missing is that practical piece. Again, yeah, I agree with you. If people do, 100% of what's in there, they're starting the right way, but you still have to practice with it, to be able to detect these different things. You have to know to look for them. I think you can do 100% of the PCI and you can still end up with target where, somebody shouted, the problem in their face and the person was still kind of dumbfounded and, deer in headlights, didn't know what to do. Most of the failures we see when we do a postmortem through a breach is people in process. It's they've got the technology they need, they have most of the controls they need, but it's the people in the process.
They haven't put the effort into the people in process to implement security.
No,
when you can tell somebody, right, hey, look, you've got a problem here, like FireEye did to Target, when they had that issue. And that person does nothing. That's where the problem needs to be solved most of the time.
So going all the way back to the beginning, that first article that, the problem is the lack of automation. No, it's not the lack of automation, in terms of the labor shortage. It's people being knowledgeable and aware and as you're saying, Adrian, practice. I agree with all of that. There's a lot built into the PCI standard that implies continuous activities, repetitive activities. There's lots of stuff that you're supposed to be doing on an ongoing basis, but we are seduced by the lure of automation saying, set it and forget it, and you don't have to worry about it. Oh, and by the way, if the buzzer goes off or the light blinks red, what do we do? What do we do now?
There needs to
that
be
wasn't in the demo.
There needs to be a focus, and I think Microsoft could serve as an example. Bill Gates sent that famous email that said, or was it Ballmer? I forget which sent the email.
No, it was Gates.
It was Gates that said, if you are working on code and you see something could be a security vulnerability, you are to stop everything and work on that security vulnerability. And I think
the end in cord, right?
And that set the priority for security and the focus and the effort of security for Microsoft, so much so that it brings us to today where they have 6 0 days that they fixed that were being exploited in the wild.
The employees permission to give a shit.
Yes.
At least they're finding them.
But one could also argue the counterpoint, Jeff, right, which is at least they found them and fixed them, right?
Right.
And didn't just ignore them. So I don't know.
That's why we pen test. That's why we do all this ethical white hat stuff. It's because we're finding the problems before the bad guys do, ostensibly.
Yeah, I think
but use those for practice. Use those. Get some cards. Get some dice. Tabletop.
There you go.
Practice.
Yeah, I mean, practice is important, but I think there's a lot of nuances too in security that you can't be doing your due diligence, the bare minimums, the basic hygiene, and all the things we talk about, and you can still be a victim of ransomware, right? You can still have pen tests and still practice like you can still be a victim, right? And I think at the end of the day, it's about the response, and hopefully you catch it before it gets bad. In ransomware, I think in this context is interesting in that if you do have a really great response program and you understand that attackers are going to get in and do stuff, and I just got to catch them faster than everyone else, you can, in a sense, mitigate this issue, because once they've gotten to the point, someone already said it already in this episode, once you get to that point where they have ransomware stuff, they've already done a ton of stuff that you can detect and respond to.
Yeah.
I agree with that, Paul.
That's very much the truth, what you're saying there, because, I mean, the key is catching them in the dwell time, right?
Yep.
Because usually ransomware is happening way, way after the initial intrusion.
Way after they've taken all your data, right? There was some article, I don't know. That
Days, weeks even.
Yeah, it talked about backups. There was an article I added that talked about backups as being, the really important thing in preventing against ransomware. I'm like, dude, that's like too late. Like, sure, you could get ransomware and restore from backups, but they encrypted all of your data. That likely means they have a copy. And that now you've just got compounding problems.
And also think about this. I mean, if they've already intruded and, days, weeks, months ago, and you go ahead and restore from backup, and they have installed persistent backdoors, you're just going to restore their backdoors.
Yep. And if they've got copies of your data, hopefully you notice that huge chunk of data leaving your network. Oh, wait, never mind.
Did you see the case where the company said, could you please leak my data?
Yeah, so I can get it back.
My backups didn't work.
But, like, never mind, Joff, to your point, like, I break into an organization, I've got a copy of all their data, I try and ransomware, they restore from backup. Maybe they kick me out. What if I go study that data? And that leads me to get back in, right?
Exactly. You don't even need that, right?
You talked about having, router configuration files you found in SMB. I have all that now, right? I am poised to break back into your network.
I'm the captain now.
Mm-hmm. You talk about things like KRB TGTs, which live for 10 years, and or service tickets, or any of the other things with inside of Active Directory. If you set some active persistence and you've got, Azure, you've got AD Connect that's syncing up to the cloud, you got O365. I'm going to build my own service ticket, build my own service account. I'll be back in, as soon as you restore. That's going to go on, and that's never going to keep someone out. You've got to rebuild and do this differently, and there's a lot of security steps to do this right, which is why all the high-level things, like Jeff's right, like PCI covers all of the things you need to get right. It's the nuances of the devil's in the details and how to do this in order, in the proper manner, and get the details right and the fundamentals right, all the way down to the nitty gritty.
Yeah, and the nitty gritty in your core infrastructure.
With Infection Monkey?
I beg your pardon?
Have any of you guys ever played with Infection Monkey?
Yeah, I played with it a ton. In fact, I built one prior to that and then looked at their code, and there's a lot of similarities there. They've done a great job, and Guardicore actually, I think I can say I've tested some of their stuff as a product, and they've done a really a good job because they leverage things like Infection Monkey, and they test their software continuously so they can detect and be able to have that visibility when things go crazy like that. Like, that software is pretty legit in some of the mechanisms it can use, and it can be extensively expanded very quickly.
Yeah, but you gotta know what to. But in the terms of agile, you gotta know what to test. And I think it goes back to what Tyler was just saying. There's a lot of nuances when you build infrastructure like Active Directory. There's a lot of nuances, and you got to know what to test. I mean, back to our attack surface monitoring. You got to know what to test before you can really get good at take advantage of something like Infection Monkey. To test all of those things, you got to know what you're testing, and you got to know what your controls are, and that's super hard.
Hey, final thought on PCI real quick. To reinforce what, I forget who was saying it. I think it was Joff. The goal is to minimize impact not to keep things secure. The reality is you're going to get breached in some way, shape, or form. The proof point for PCI is that there's a whole requirement that's devoted to making sure you're capturing log data and copying it to a centralized server so that you can perform a forensic investigation after the breach has happened.
Which requirement is that? So I can commit it to memory, Jeff.
10.
Requirement 10.
Ooh, very good, Adrian. Impressive.
I've spent a lot of time, way too much time in PCI.
Yeah.
Not as much as me.
Ooh, fight. Fight.
Been in it since it existed.
We're gonna. There's gonna be a. There's gonna be a. There's gonna be a test.
Since it was Visa, CISP, and MasterCard SDP.
2004.
Yeah. I worked for a large credit card processor when it came out and went through all the pains of trying to implement 1.0 at a credit card processor that did 4.5 million transactions a day. So I didn't want to, but I was there, and
we're gonna have a set of questions. We're gonna give Adrian and Jeff a buzzer, and they're gonna have like a Jeopardy style.
Let's do
so
it.
entertaining.
I can see it. PCI Jeopardy. Here we go.
PCI security deathmatch.
Who's gonna judge? Because none of you know the answers.
Which vendor was called out in PCI 1.0? I bet you know this, Jeff. And they removed it quickly thereafter.
And it's why it doesn't exist in soft copy form, but I have a hard copy of it. It's Tripwire.
Yeah.
What requirement was it in? Was it called out in?
Ruh-roh.
The FIM requirement would have been somewhere in 11, right?
That's a good guess. It's actually the FIM requirement for the logs, so it's 10.5, not 11.5.
Wow, he was so close. He was half a point off.
Can you guys keep going? It's like wildly entertaining.
The numbers change
so awesome.
from version to version. Oh my God.
Can we get them?
I'm not going to have the numbers memorized.
Can we get them flags with Dick Cheney on it so that they can have a dick waving contest? Because it's awesome. I love this. Keep going. Come on.
This is going to be a whole new podcast series. This is Jeff and Adrian.
I know I'll win.
Goose, can you make popcorn? Because we're going to hang out for a little bit here.
No. What we need to do is have Jeff and Adrian have a drinking game. Adrian, you just got a question wrong. You need to take a drink. You take a shot.
If that's good stuff, don't shoot it.
Next time you're hurting for a technical segment, we'll have the PCI showdown.
All right, Adrian, one more question for Jeff. See if you can stump Jeff on PCI.
On PCI,
I'm putting Adrian on the spot here.
let's
see. And now are we referring this as to stump the chump?
Stump the PCI expert.
Don't I get to try to stump Adrian? Or
you just did.
You just did that.
Oh wait, and now we're turning it around the other way. It's called stump the grump.
Get off my lawn.
There you go. Adrian, I'm trying to buy time here, buddy. Come on.
You can see his gears turning.
It's tough not to give like a practical question. Like one of the toughest requirements is the do you go with code review or WAF? You know that requirement?
6.6.
The answer is always yes.
Jeff knows the requirement.
Yeah, I mean, how do you advise a customer on that? Like I could just take questions, but this is actually a tough, thing to handle with customers. Like how do you advise customers?
And technically, now I have to correct you again
because everybody's just going to go with the WAF. Right?
Code review is a separate requirement. The WAF or periodic security testing of your application is 6.6.
So what you're saying, Jeff, is it's not an or, it's an and?
Pretty much.
Adrian, drink again. I'm giving this one to Jeff.
Adrian, we love you. We love you. Oh, we love you, Adrian.
That's awesome. I want to keep going.
So several years ago, when my kids were young, when they were children, there was a TV show
years ago.
like "Are You Smarter Than a?" Was it sixth grader?
Sixth grader,
I think it was. And somebody got the board game home edition for Christmas, so we sat down to play it. I went first. I answered every single question and won the game in one turn.
So you're as smart as a 7th grader.
I'm as smart as a 7th grader.
And that makes him a very talented QSA.
Yep.
That's what I'm saying.
And that's also why he never gets invited to any parties.
And next week on Stump the Grump.
Pretty much.
Yep.
That's why they gave me my own show. I'm supposed to be off in the SCW corner talking PCI and never bringing it up here again.
See, Adrian doesn't look happy, and you'd think with all that booze, he'd be a little happier.
Now Adrian looks like the Grump. I think we should call it Stump the Grump.
Oh, the problem is, Paul, you're up next week.
I like this. We
I know.
Yeah. We should do this again.
Yes, we should.
We should. Adrian's like, I'm going to go study. And we should do this again.
Dude, I've got a PCI folder in Dropbox that is just like so many levels deep. Dropbox is just like, too long. Directory.
How many levels deep is your Dropbox folder, Jeff?
Somebody's got to explain it to Adrian about just how far back in this Jeff goes.
I go back
Let
to
'em
before
try.
PCI, so I don't know. Like, how do you win that battle?
Well,
I go back
dinosaurs.
I go back 20 years before PCI.
Oh, my God.
And was buddies with Charles Babbage when he invented the first computer.
Pretty much.
I don't want this to end.
You say that to your wife every time you have sex, too.
I remember when our internet was a string in a cup and we kept going.
And Paul's wife says, halftime's almost over. Can we call this? Larry, can you take us out?
Yes, Larry, please.
Make it
take us out. It's got to end.
I don't even know if I can. Like, the words are escaping me over and out.